Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome in. Welcome back. I'm feeling pretty sick still. I'll be coughing. But we'll do our best. We will do our best. Hey, how's it going? Yeah, I'm feeling better than previous days. There's been some days on Saturday I was like it was particularly bad. I don't know. I slept through it mostly. What happened to me? Oh, I just have like a sinus infection. But they clear up on their own. They clear up pretty quickly. You just got to do the thing where you let your body rest. You just have to do the thing when you sleep all day, which kind of sucks. I don't like doing that. I'm not a big like sleep all day type person. Um yeah, I don't know. I feel like vaguely delirious. Um so we'll see, we'll see. Do we have the formal with Islamic Apex lined up? Yeah, although we keep on moving it back. So at first it was scheduled for like the 31st, and then he moved it back a week to the 7th, and then I moved it back a week on the 7th. And right now it's scheduled on the 14th. So we've gone one for one. The real coward is whoever does it next. No, I'm kidding. It's things happen. It's hard to schedule things, hard to line things up. But yeah, hopefully we'll be able to have the debate. I've done a good amount of prep work for it, so we'll see. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, sharing it with your friends, and all that good stuff. If you're in that guest request box, make sure that you're 18 or older. Make sure that you believe in the God of the Bible, the Torah, or the Quran. You can be a deist too. That's fine. I don't mind if you want to talk about like a God of minimal theism. Although I'm coming around to the view that you kind of need to specify what God's intentions are, what God's goals are, in order for him to even be like a not like instantly dead explanation for anything. Like, I don't even think that God could explain the fact that life exists absent certain like intentions or certain goals that he's trying to achieve. Otherwise, it becomes like just a categorically worse explanation than saying like, well, it's just a brute fact that life exists in the universe. It's a brute fact that God desires life, and then you just the naturalist counters by saying it's a brute fact that life exists in the universe. And then, the naturalist has one fewer thing on the worldview, so they win on parsimony. So I don't know. It's these explanatory deficit arguments are pretty powerful, I think. Hey, what the? Okay. On my sick day too. Hey, how's it going?
When did you last shit?
Wow. Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, doing well. We haven't talked in a while. What's
It's
up?
been a minute. I'm a little sleepy, so excuse me.
It's okay.
I guess I would say my best argument is consciousness. I don't think there's a naturalist or I don't know, other explanation that makes sense to me. If you want to provide your best argument for consciousness, I don't see why there would be this reality with consciousness rather one with not.
Yeah, this doesn't. I don't think that theism provides like a particularly good, compelling explanation for consciousness. It kind of seems like you just bake it into the hypothesis. If that's the theistic move, is to just say, well, consciousness exists as one of like the fundamental categories. I'm not sure what would stop the naturalist from saying, well, consciousness just exists as one of the natural or as one of the fundamental categories. Maybe you take like a Russellian monist view and you say that there's like consciousness embedded in like the matter of reality, that there's like some qualia, some like qualitative properties there. Maybe you take like a panpsychist approach, but it just seems like there's a ton of maneuvers that the naturalist could do that would be like no worse than the theist move of just kind of positing it.
I mean, I would agree with you on the first part. I think a lot of atheists find a lot of maneuvers to try and rationalize atheism, but I don't think that inherently means that the position is correct. I think if we reduce a lot of the atheist positions, like panpsychism, eventually they fall towards some sort of like classical determinism, and you start to lose concepts like agency, free will, rational thought. I just don't see a good argument once you start reducing things that kind of gives way to consciousness or any sense of free will whatsoever.
Okay, so these seem to be like different data points. I mean, it sounds like you then agree that the naturalist can appeal to these sorts of things then, but also, I mean, the naturalist could just be like a dualist. Like they could literally just hold that there's like a mental substance that exists that's separate from the physical substance, and then you
Well,
could say that the
you'd
free
be
will
borrowing
exists
from
there.
you'd be borrowing from one other worldview. I don't think. I mean, you'd have to bridge the gap, right?
Why can't a naturalist be like a dualist about the mind and just think
I
that
didn't
there's like
say
a mental substance and also a physical substance?
I didn't say they couldn't. Like, you can choose to believe whatever you want. I just don't. Um, I guess you'd have to provide a convincing argument. So, could you give some details at the position you take, or is it just you're saying that people could hold more than one view that has some sort of dualism?
This seems to be like a slight burden shift that just happened. Your argument is that there's this really good data point that only theism is able to explain that naturalism can't explain, but now you're saying that, well, naturalists can explain it, like there isn't like some sort of internal incoherence. You know, you could just appeal to like all of the things related to consciousness. You could critique all the other positions and then also argue that God doesn't exist. I don't know. It just seems like there's lots and lots of responses. It seems like atheism is compatible with a lot of views on consciousness. I
It could
also think that
seem
you could
so,
just be
but
like a physicalist.
it could seem so, but it doesn't necessarily make it true. I'm not trying to shift the burden. Part of my argument is that there's um, no substantial argument from an atheist position, whether it be classical determinism or some sort of compatibilism or dualism, that doesn't inherently make it borrow from another
What
worldview,
does that
which I
mean?
think, well, for example, if you take a naturalist or materialist position, when you reduce it to its, I guess, its simplest terms, you start to lose concepts of agency, because I guess the argument is that cause and effect, or everything is reducible to its means or beginnings, and then consciousness essentially would be emergent, right? But that doesn't inherently mean that it's free. And I think things like experience, whether I think that's one thing scientists and theists can agree is kind of hard to measure. Just having some sense of qualia, and I think that feels, and I think we all feel that viewers, listeners, or just the human experience in general has some sort of I don't know, ephemeral nature that seems to escape just the binary ones and zeros. So I get what you're saying, like it could be burden shift thing, but part of my argument is that I mean, I don't want to do the whole God of the gaps things, but part of my argument is that atheism doesn't really have an explanation for consciousness. So if I'm trying to rationalize the world around me, and one of the most prominent things is the fact that we have experience whatsoever, for me to accept atheism, I would want some sort of scientific grounding that bases consciousness in our natural reality.
Yeah, okay, so there's like a number of problems with this. The first is that just didn't answer the question like whatsoever. The question was, what do you mean by borrows from other worldviews? All you gave me was an example where you said, well, the atheist is if the atheist adopts dualism, then they're going to lose things like agency. Everything's going to become cause and effect. But I don't even know why that would be true. Like, I have no idea why even that would follow. It also like doesn't really tell me what it means to say that something is borrowing from some other worldview. And in terms of like atheism being locked into like only scientific data, atheism is just the belief that God doesn't exist. Atheism is compatible with being a dualist about mind. It's compatible with being, you know, any number of views about philosophy of mind. Hell, you could probably be an atheist and also like an idealist about mind. So the idea that there's just this like, you know, the atheist needs to provide like this one hyper specific sort of justification and needs to adopt like one type of position, but then the theist can just adopt, you know, they're like free to posit it. I'm not sure why that would be.
Well, my understanding is that in this debate, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're trying to establish truth. Is that not the case?
Yeah.
Or if you're
And
just trying to say God isn't real, anyone can believe in atheism. You can have, you know, you can believe in the, you know, Pastafarianism, you know, but if you and I want to come to some sort of consensus about the natural reality, I think even just bringing up that argument to begin with, that, you know, atheist doesn't inherently mean it has to be classical determinism. I think we're both trying to find an explanation for, you know, the nature around us. So I think part of the reason why I'm shifting the burden on you is I still haven't heard quite a good argument from an atheist position or a scientific position, or if you even have a good position whatsoever. I think a lot of people would want to try and understand things like consciousness or human experience that kind of just goes beyond theism. Like you said, if you disagree with theism, then I think there should be some sort of evidence for the counter.
yeah, I mean, so here's like the killer piece of evidence, which is just that the worldview is simpler. That you count the fundamental categories. You know, the theist is committed to the natural stuff and the supernatural stuff, and the atheist is committed to, or the naturalist, for example, is committed to just the natural stuff. And of course, naturalism entails atheism. So if we were to adopt a position like naturalism, you could be a naturalist and a dualist, and then you would have a full explanation for consciousness. You know, you would have the same sort of consciousness categories as theism, but you would have one fewer natural, supernatural category. So then you would be able to explain why there's like the conscious things, because it's one of your categories is that you believe in the consciousness substance. But then also, you know, you don't have the supernatural stuff, so it's a simpler worldview.
Well, you just explained the components of some of these worldviews, but what I'm looking for particularly is some sort of actual tangible information that rationally explains consciousness in a way that's understandable.
Wait, sorry, do you think your worldview provides that?
Well, I think you reject that. I mean, I could
Well, could
argue
you
that, but
explain like why just God existing explains consciousness?
well, sure. I think for consciousness to exist, it needs to be grounded in some sort of basis, um, I guess, source, and that would be an eternal rational mind. It's kind of just like how, like, we have material things that come from material sources.
Okay, so does God have consciousness?
Does God have consciousness?
Yeah,
Um, I think God is the grounding of consciousness. God is all things. He's the Alpha, the Omega,
but does he have
the first and the last.
consciousness?
Does he have consciousness?
Does he have like
Um,
qualitative experience?
so I think it would be difficult for me to answer that, and I mean this genuinely, because I think when you say God has something, it's difficult for me to comprehend that concept, and I think humans in general would have difficulty comprehending something like that, because if God is omnipotent and has, you know, all of these different attributes and features, then God having something would just kind of like being like water being wet, I guess, in a sense. It's kind of like, it's not some, like, God is all things. So sure, I mean, for the sake of the conversation, I guess God has consciousness, but God is the grounding of all consciousness. So it's kind of like, I think it's irrelevant of a talking point because it's
Oh,
kind of, it's already established.
that leads to circular grounding. Then be saying that. So you said earlier that consciousness is grounded in some further thing external to it, and then
Would
you're saying
would
that God is
circular,
conscious. He
sure.
has consciousness. So then, therefore, God's consciousness would be circularly grounded in Himself. So you would have to say
Is-
that God's consciousness
What's
is the
wrong with that?
grounding of God's consciousness Typically,
What's wrong
grounding
with
is
that,
taken
though?
to be an asymmetric relation. The reason for that is that grounding is taken to be a sort of like explanatory relationship, that when something grounds something else, it's explaining why it is rather than isn't, and just saying, well, A explains itself. Well, that's just not an explanation. You're
Right. Well,
just saying
that's
it is because it
exactly.
is.
Well, that's exactly, and that's why I said the proposition wouldn't really make sense because God can't, I guess, necessarily have something that He already is the foundation for. It's kind of like A equals A equals A equals A equals A. I mean, I don't see there necessarily something wrong with there being it's circular because God is the beginning and the last, and those components or arguments don't really apply for something that's all encompassing, right?
So I'm confused at this point. So he does have consciousness or he doesn't?
I wouldn't be able to answer
Okay.
respectfully. At least not in a way that would satisfy what you're asking, or not in an authentic way. Could I explain that? It feels like I would say it feels like to me that God has consciousness, but I want to be careful of the way that I verbalize that because it could get me into specific traps that I may want to avoid. I think my gut instinct when answering that is if God is the foundation and of all things, then it's really not something you necessarily have to go down that type of rhetoric or dialectic. Sorry.
So, well, but then at that point, it becomes unclear. You're saying that God has a mind, or that God is a mind, because he's like the eternal rational mind.
The eternal rational mind that is the foundation of all things that exist. Yes.
Yeah, he's like the eternal rational mind, but typically minds have consciousness.
So then, I mean, like I said, it feels as if he has consciousness.
But then he doesn't literally have consciousness.
Not in the way that we perceive consciousness, I would probably say no.
Okay, well, then I think that this fails as an explanation because I don't think that valid explanations use like terms analogically. I don't think that it makes sense to say that we explain consciousness because it comes from this thing that's analogous to a mind that we have nothing to compare it to.
I think that's a form of argument of escapism. You don't necessarily want to engage because it's complex and may not satisfy, the basic grounds or educational or academic foundations for the dialectic. But I think if we, try and be a little bit more abstract and approach this in a complicated way, I think together we could find some sort of rationalize. I don't think what I'm saying is particularly difficult to understand, although I do respect that it may not satisfy what you respect under, logic or reason.
I just don't know what it means to say that God is a mind, but one that isn't strictly speaking conscious. That just doesn't really mean anything to me. It's like saying, this is my friend, he's a bachelor, but he's not strictly speaking unmarried.
Well, I'm not saying that God isn't conscious. I'm kind of picking at this specific point that God would have consciousness because it's kind of like I don't know if the right word is non secular. It's just doesn't really matter.
Like, I think that it probably does matter, right? We're talking about how we account for
Don't
consciousness in our worldview. You're saying that the way you account for it is that God is a mind, and then God's mind is the source of all the consciousness. If you just want to
okay, so
brute
it's kind of
posit that
like
God is conscious, that consciousness exists, and that's just a brute posit, that's fine. You can make that move, but then the atheist can make the exact same move and be like a dualist.
well, we could go in that direction, but I don't think you can necessarily brute force dualism because there's a lot of contradictions. Um,
You don't want to say that. Theism is like probably committed to dualism.
we can maybe get to that part later, but the main point that I was saying is like if God is the eternal rational mind, you wouldn't necessarily have consciousness in the same way that H2O doesn't like possess wetness, if that makes sense. It's already kind of the property that's intrinsic to the nature of God, which is why God is the eternal rational mind. But like having consciousness, I think kind of separates the authority or sovereignty or power of God. Does that
So
kind of make sense? Or
I'm
sorry if
I think
I'm
I'm like a bit
babbling.
unclear on it. So does God have like experience? Is there something that it's like to be God?
Well, we could take the biblical account. I think if you accept that Jesus was God in the human flesh, then yeah, Jesus had a human experience as in God, but I can't really quite answer that in God the Father, because I think someone else that you had up who takes an atheist position is, how do you account for like volition or God doing will? That's something that is hard for me to wrap my head around as God the Father.
Wow, why'd the audio gifts get louder or so? Gosh. And they're so long
That's
too. What a
powerful.
horrible system. Yeah. Mods, crucify that guy. Yeah, sir, what were you saying?
um so God the Son would have experience like the human experience. So you could say yes. But I don't think the way that we understand experience could inherently be applied to God the Father. So it's kind of hard for me to compare that to something that would be understood rationally. And I think that's the whole point when trying to relate to God the Father, or the Alpha or Omega, is you kind of have to accept that there's some sort of nature to God that it's incomprehensible. I mean, it's also written in Scripture that it would be incomprehensible. So, just me talking to you, I'm doing my best.
That's okay. So here's the problem as far as I can tell. It kind of runs into the critique earlier. Maybe I should just make it a bit more clearly. We can make predictions based on the things that we know and what we expect based on those things. So I can understand what it means for a mind to ground something. There are lots of examples of things that are grounded in a mind. For example, songs are grounded in a mind. Stories are grounded in minds. They exist kind of dispersed across minds. I don't know what it means for something to be grounded in a shmind. You're saying that God doesn't have a literal mind. He has something else, a shmind. I don't know what it means to have a shmind, so I can't evaluate an explanation like that.
I mean, that's kind of fair. I don't want to speak for all Christians or believers. I think it would be difficult for anyone to evaluate an eternal rational mind, and that's kind of the difficulty here. I think that's what we're trying to work on. But one of the points that I'm trying to poke at, which is a burden shift, is it doesn't quite logically make sense for consciousness to exist or give some sort of agency or free will if we were to reduce it entirely to materialism, because that kind of paves ways for a series of ones and zeros or evolution to kind of produce an emergent experience that would kind of just be we wouldn't really have any sort of choice.
But then that would just be you forcing the atheist into materialism. I don't know why the atheist is committed to materialism. I understand that a materialist would be an atheist. I don't know. It seems like atheism is compatible with basically every single view in philosophy of mind.
Okay, so then for the sake of so I don't disagree with you. We're like I mentioned before, we could believe anything, and I'm not trying to crush all atheists. I guess I'm more so having to want to have a conversation with you. If I could ask you personally, how would you, ground the world around us? How does it make sense to you? Where does agency and free will and those things come from?
And by free will, what do you mean? Do you mean like some like libertarian sense of free will where you're like the uncaused cause of your actions?
Just that we can choose this or that.
Oh, yeah, we have like deliberative processes. So in our deliberation, we have like live epistemic possibilities. We can imagine ourselves taking one action, we can imagine ourselves taking the other action, and it's through the deliberative process that you have those choices.
Right, and the deliberative process comes from evolution, which would come from naturalism. I guess where I'm trying to find is the position that gives us I guess an equal grounding of what we feel as free will, or would you say that it is somewhat of an illusion? Because yes, we can choose this or that, but if it comes from our deliberative processes, which comes from evolution, then it would be inherently illusionary.
Well, first of all, I just don't think it follows that if something comes from something that's deterministic, that therefore that thing must be deterministic itself. I just don't know why that would be true. But I mean, like, let's say that that's true. Why can't determinism be compatible with free will? This is an extremely popular position among philosophers. It's called compatibilism.
Right, which is what I was mentioning before. I think compatibilism, you're kind of borrowing because you're saying that there is free will with determinism or whatever atheist position you have, but it doesn't really bridge the gap. So I'm
Why
trying to
not?
figure out because
What's
you
the
haven't
critique of it?
provided the critique is that there hasn't yet been a scientific or substantial explanation that combines determinism and explains the emergent mind that allows for free rational thought that isn't reduced to just survivalist components. So, for example, if we're all in the common deterministic and even compatibilistic position, is that we fall under the processes of logic and that the universe is defined by logic. And if everything was defined by logic, it kind of almost seems illogical for us to have this reality that even has consciousness to begin with. Like, why would we just have a reality of a bunch of atoms exploding into each other randomly that is extremely more chaotic rather than this one that has some sort of foundation that we can move in through this 3D space quite comfortably?
So you made a claim just now. One of the claims that you made is that there is no existing account of compatibilism that bridges the gap between free will and determinism. Have you looked into that issue particularly deeply? Like, have you like read
Um,
through accounts? Do you think that you're in a position to be making a claim that there is no existing account?
yes, that is my claim.
Can you name 3 compatibilists?
I cannot name 3
Can you
compatibilists.
name 1 compatibilist?
I preface this, I woke up I
Don't
don't
you
know,
think that
maybe
you should know like
Dawkins.
the first thing about compatibilism or like one single compatibilist before you make a claim like all the compatibilist accounts fail?
I mean, one could argue that, but in the dialectic, it's pretty common for someone to appeal to knowledge. So I don't disagree with that, but I don't want to belabor the conversation on trying to reduce my understanding. I think it can be quite condescending and it actually doesn't help the conversation. If you want to sweep me and just beat me that way, one could say you could, but I think you're just trying to escape the conversation.
Well, I just think that this is the sort of claim that like it's just kind of like a baffling claim to make. It's a claim that I think that you should feel very confident. Like you should have read like so much literature to make a claim like that. In order to make a claim like every compatibilist account fails, that would require you to actually go through every compatibilist account.
Sure.
Are
So,
you just saying like you've never heard one that's worked?
well, first, my initial point was I wanted you to actually answer my first question, and then um, your response was to put into question my understanding of compatibilism and any philosophers or atheists who understand compatibilism. And I think that's just pivoting away from my initial question, which is me asking you. So I don't think my misunderstandings are actually necessarily relevant with me making the claim. I think in a conversation or a dialectic, you want to engage with the claim rather than just trying to, I guess, use just some sort of Platonism or Aristotelian argument to, reduce my intelligence.
Listen, I just think that I think that this is a valid point to be making. I think that there's a claim that's in the same neighborhood that could have the same effect as the one that you made that's just, unassailable. If you instead, so the claim that you made is that there is no compatibilist account that successfully bridges the gap. That's like totally indefensible if you've never read a single compatibilist. If you haven't read through the works of if you haven't read about like the Frankfurt cases that try to motivate compatibilism, or if you haven't read the works of people like, Hume or A.J. Ayer, where they defend compatibilism, then it just doesn't seem like you would be in a position to make that sort of claim. But a claim that would be totally fair for you to make is a claim like, I don't see how a compatibilist, or like I've never heard how a compatibilist would account for this facet of free will and determinism. I think that there's a claim where you could bring it back to like your own understanding and say that you just don't understand how this might work, and then I could give you perhaps like some options for what a compatibilist might say.
Well, are you a compatibilist?
I think atheism is certainly compatible with compatibilism. I'm not I don't believe in libertarian free will, although honestly, I think atheism is compatible with all three: libertarian free will, compatibilism, and like incompatible determinism.
So when you say you don't believe in libertarian free will, what do you mean by that?
I don't believe in the sort of free will wherein like you're the uncaused cause of all of your actions. Like I think that that's gibberish.
So you believe that our actions or our choices all come from sort of a beginning cause?
Yeah, I think that there's going to be some sort of cause that underlies our actions. I don't think that something comes from nothing, as one might say. I don't think that our motivation to act on a specific thing or our decision to act on a specific thing comes from nothing.
Sure. So, like some people are saying, like chemical processes. Okay, so then can I ask you a genuine question that may be offensive, but I hope
Sure,
not
go
to
for
offend
it.
you? Do you believe in like genuine love?
What does genuine love mean?
I'm just asking if you believe in like, so what is your understanding of love, or do you believe in any sense of love?
Yeah, I think that you can understand love, like you can understand many phenomena through like a variety of lenses, you know. In the same way, you can understand a car as like a cultural phenomena, or you can understand it as like a historical product that came from like the evolution of technology, or you can understand it from like a strictly physics perspective. You can also understand it like symbolically. You can understand there's like a trillion different dimensions through which you can understand a car. Likewise, I think
So
there's a
what is the
trillion
way that
different dimensions that you can
you
understand
understand
love
love?
through. I think that you can understand love as a combination of chemicals. I think you can understand it as something that's deeply meaningful to people, you know, as like this feeling of closeness, this thing that people are willing to die for. I just think that there are a lot of different lenses that you can understand love through.
You can, but I want to know which is the truth. First and foremost, I want to know what you believe rather than what we can believe.
They're
And
all
the reason why
true.
I ask, they're all
In the
true.
same way, like all the lenses about the car, all the different ways that you could think about a car as, you know, a product of like certain historical steps, or you know, like physics reactions going on in the car, or like a symbol of societal power, like all of those things are true, but depending on the context, some of those lenses are going to be more useful than others, and there's no contradiction between any of them.
Well, the foundations of our arguments are based on things like logic and philosophy. So I'm not looking for esoteric explanations of love in this particular case, although I would agree with you. We can find love in the trees and the birds and in art or in culture and anthropology. I don't disagree with that. But I think when we're talking about things like, you know, philosophy and logic and agency, what I'm trying to poke at here is if you believe in something, you know, such as love, and we're to, you know, reduce it in some aspect to determinism, naturalism, or even compatibilism, we would kind of be going to some sort of chemical processes. So, and just like me, I have a girlfriend. I know you have a girlfriend as well. Would you say that you chose to love your girl, like you chose your girlfriend, you picked your girlfriend, or would you say that evolution and naturalism ultimately led a domino effect of cause and effect that kind of, um, I guess, led you to your girlfriend without any actual free choice, but some sort of illusionary choice?
Yeah, this is a false dichotomy that kind of begs the question against the compatibilist view that I was talking
Why?
about
I don't think
earlier,
so.
that you're
I don't think so at
presupposing
all.
that having a choice in doing something is incompatible with your deliberative mechanisms coming from evolution. I think that you can have a real, genuine choice, and also that this choice comes about via your deliberation on your options in front of you, and that this deliberation process can emerge via evolution.
Sure, but I don't think the free will that we think of or speak about in the Bible is equal to the deliberative choice that you're talking about. I think the one that we offer in our faith is a little bit more transcendental and goes beyond essentially what you're positing. Because I think if we apply, you know, the explanation that you're saying, I think that we result at things like love or result at things like even law, things like that. I think they could ultimately all be reduced to some sort of logical process or some sort of mathematical process that would actually rob us of true agency in the purest sense.
Why? I kind of feel like we keep getting to this point. I'm trying to figure out what does your account of free will offer that mine doesn't? What does it account for that mine doesn't account for? And it feels like we always kind of bottom out in like these vagaries where it's like, well, you know, yours is like the true agency, yours is like the true free will, and mine is like the fake free will. And I just don't know, like, is this just like verbal? Is there not any like substantive content there? Is there like a phenomena that yours accounts for that mine doesn't?
Well, I think you actually said it very well. I would like to take that exact prompt and apply that to what I was trying to say about compatibilism, because I still think it hasn't quite been presented to me a convincing argument for how we can bridge the gap between some sort of emergent consciousness. Because when I have done my research, and again I apologize, I'm very tired. Who's the guy who talks about consciousness is like putting on a helmet or something like that?
Uh,
1 second.
no idea. Is this like the Cartesian theater?
Possibly who says put consciousness on like headphones or something like that. It's this guy I was no. Oh, Donald Hoffman, who uses the analogy with a headset interface that says virtual reality headset analogy. Our perceptions are like user interface that hides the underlying structure of reality rather than showing reality as it actually is. His view is that space-time and physical objects are more like icons or interface elements rather than fundamental reality. So consciousness itself is fundamental. Individual minds are localized expressions of it. And Donald Hoffman would say our experience reality is like wearing a VR headset.
Okay. That certainly is his view, I guess. I'm not sure I agree with that. So what I think when you take like a look at the data, the pattern that I seem to see, you know, your consciousness doesn't, your sense perception doesn't perceive everything. You know, there are frequencies of light that you can't perceive. But typically, if you can't perceive something, it's because it's not relevant to your survival. It's because you don't do anything with that information. There's nothing for you to do with that information. Whereas, you know, when you do see things, when it is made apparent to you, you can see the layers that are relevant for your survival. So it's not like your brain is like misrepresenting things or, you know, collapsing it into like a simpler process.
Sure, but I mean, it could collapse into something entirely different. Like, why? It seems that consciousness is necessary to our reality, and it's in some sense foundational to all things that have some sort of relation. The thing that I said before, we moved away from it, but it's like, why do we have this reality versus one that could be catastrophically different, one that doesn't have consciousness or doesn't have sentient beings whatsoever, but it could have just been a reality of smashing atoms entirely. Instead, we have one that is pretty coherent. So
Because the laws of
why is
physics
that?
are
Yeah, and they exist because why? Yeah, we have laws of physics, but laws of physics could have been entirely different.
why? Why would I think that they could have been entirely different?
Why not?
Okay, so it doesn't seem like there's like a substantive argument there. So a reason to think that they likely couldn't have been, or, you know, just like a way to explain these is that you could say that the laws of physics are just the abstractions of the dispositions that underlie various particles, and that these dispositions come about via like various symmetries that are present within these underlying like physical structures, you know, like space-time, for example. Space-time gives rise to gravity, and it's because gravity literally just is, on the space-time manifold, the path of least resistance between two objects that have mass.
Okay, sure. So I guess you're essentially saying that it couldn't have been any other way. Like, this is a universe we got, and we're here.
I think the atheist can probably take multiple stances on this. I think that the atheist could say, you know, that it couldn't have been any other way. I think the atheist could probably say that there's like some sort of multiverse, or that even, you know, the cosmological model is such that the laws of physics get jumbled around every now and then. You know, maybe in every big bounce and big crunch, the laws of nature get jumbled around. It seems like there's a
Sure.
lot of positions that the atheist could
Well,
take on this.
it would be difficult for me to debate or argue any points if we don't, tack on or stick on to a certain view that is personal. Um,
But that's a
I'm trying
problem for
to.
your argument, because if your argument requires the falsity of like a dozen live options, well, then that means that you're probably looking in the wrong place.
Well, it sounds like you're just saying you could rationalize whatever you want to believe in many different positions. And my argument is that you're kind of just taking an esoteric approach to rationalizing the nature around you. Because a lot of the verbiage and things that you've been saying is, well, the atheist could go in this direction, the atheist could go in this direction. But if we're trying to find something that is true, 2 + 2 = 4. Like, it's not the atheist, well, could take this direction and doing two, it's not a really coherent argument.
Well, yeah, I just don't agree with this. And there's like good statistical reason. So when you're trying to assess
You
the
don't agree that
probability of a
there's truth?
hypothesis, if you start like tacking hypotheses on top of each other, you say, well, this hypothesis is true, or this hypothesis that's incompatible with that one is true, or that hypothesis is true, or that hypothesis is true. It actually gets strictly more probable. Like the probability actually increases as you start tacking more hypotheses on. You add more to the probability space, or you start like taking up more of the probability space. So when we're evaluating whether or not we should adopt like my worldview or your worldview, and my worldview is able to explain the data in like a ton of live ways, but your worldview can only explain it in like one way, which is like tenuous. I don't know. I'm just not sure why I wouldn't make that move. It just seems like
Well,
the
I
statistically
mean,
rational move to make.
by that logic, the Christian could do the same thing, and why would you have an argument against that?
Yeah, because at that point they would have to contend with like the actual data that I'm putting forward. I would actually just love an explanation for the data. If you're putting forward data and the atheist can explain it in like a trillion different ways, I mean, I would love to hear your explanation. Even like a trillion different explanations for something like, I don't know, the Ashfall Valley catastrophe, where in like, 12 million years ago, there were these like rhinoceroses that got asphyxiated to death by like volcanic ash. Their babies died first, and then the parents died later, and it was like some agonizing death for all of them. I'd love to hear what the theistic explanation, or even a dozen theistic explanations for that is, but I suspect it's going to be something like, I don't know, God's ways are higher.
Like, what would be my explanation?
Yeah, how would a
about
theist
the
explain
problem
something
with,
like that? Presumably
the
God is
problem with
opposed to
evil?
like grotesque animal suffering. Why would God allow for this grotesque animal suffering?
So you're just asking, like, the problem of evil, right?
This one specific instance of evil, not just like all evil.
The one specific instance of avalanches falling on, rhinoceroses and
It's
killed
like,
all the babies in agonizing pain.
yeah, it's like a volcanic eruption that happened in Nebraska. It suffocated over the course of like several days. In fact, the rhinoceroses are preserved in ash. They're fossilized.
Well, this is what I would say. In the reality that I exist in, I think there is a ubiquitous amount of joy, happiness, love within our reality. Yes, suffering does exist, but I think most people who have experience understand, or people with an imagination kind of have accepted that it could be infinitely worse than this. So even the most terrible atrocities, I think there is some form of beauty in it. Can I say it in a way that doesn't sound like passive and condescending? Probably not, but I think if you listen to it in this way, I think some of the most profound growth in all humanity has actually come from some of the most devastating atrocities. I think communities actually have been built and grown upon the losses of individuals. And another side note that I would say, I think a lot of the things that do occur specifically in the human experience could also be resolved by our own means. I think sometimes when we're trying to evaluate something like an eternal rational mind, we want to obfuscate responsibility. But the true thing is that if we are made in the image of God and we have any sense of free will, some of the free will that you say, like choice, I think some of those outcomes could actually be mitigated at the very least by the human experience. So I don't I don't really I don't really respect the argument necessarily for the problem of evil because I just don't live in a world, at least in my world, where I would necessarily say that it is as atrocious as you say it is or expect it to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably the most prominent thing that I notice is that this just doesn't address the data at all. You're talking about like the human experience. I'm talking about these rhinoceroses that got asphyxiated to death 10 million years ago, long before humans, Homo sapien, existed. Um, when I guess maybe this is like a good way to frame the problem. Let's say we're imagining the kind of world that's created by a perfectly loving, maximally empathetic, good, loving, all powerful, all knowing being. Would I expect it to include natural disasters that lead to horrific deaths like asphyxiation of wild animals? No, I wouldn't expect that. This is quite surprising, actually. This is more so what I would expect from like a medieval torturer designing a world.
Right. So you're using your expectations to apply a judgment based on what you assume would logically follow because of why.
Hmm.
Do you
You don't
know
want
do you
to
know the trolley argument
you don't
or
want to
the
do
the
that move.
trolley?
This move is like the infinity blender. If your claim is that we can't make predictions about what God will or won't do, then nothing is evidence for God's existence. The stars in the skies could say God is real in every language on earth, and that wouldn't be any
That's not what I
evidence
was arguing.
because
Sorry,
your
I probably
view doesn't
misspoke.
make any predictions about what God would or wouldn't do. You need the ability to make predictions about God's actions. Otherwise, nothing is evidence for him.
I'm not saying that you can't make any predictions. I think we have a lot of evidence, especially just in our natural world, that can have some sort of prediction. But I think we're putting the cart before the horse and we're jumping a lot of steps because it's kind of like the trolley um thing or whatever. Um sorry, I'm so exhausted.
That's
I've been
okay.
like gaming for 20 hours. I'm trying to make top 0.01% in my bracket. And I've been playing nonstop.
You're all
I'm very
good.
close.
What game are you playing?
I play World of Warcraft competitive.
Oh, fuck yeah. That's
Oh my God.
that's
I'm so
sick.
tired, bro. Thank you. Thank you. I'm 10 points off, but I have a bunch of very hateful people who are particularly trying to snipe me.
Hmm. Don't let
That's
them
how
get
it
you
goes.
down. That's awesome.
Oh, I'll be fine. I'm just very tired. So let's see. Where was I going with this? So, like with the trolley experiment, I'm not saying that we can't draw any conclusions or any expectations whatsoever. I just am hard pressed to say that because of the things that we have observed, it inherently means I would expect this out of a torturous person. Well, I think there are a lot of things we have to evaluate and see come to fruition before we make a final judgment. So it's kind of like the same thing. Like if I'm choosing left or right to save one person or save five people, right? One would say like, oh my God, he chose left and that one person, died. Like he's evil. But what you didn't know is that if he had chosen right, it would have gone, devastatingly worse. So I think there is a reason and a choice for all things. That specific case, I think it's kind of, irrelevant. But if we were to ask the basis question of like, why does suffering exist? I think in our natural reality, we understand that things like agency and consequence are a direct result of our choices, whether it be the animal's choices or whether it be the result of the way that nature is created. God would essentially have some sort of purpose. And for us to exist in the reality that we observe it, those things we know occur as we see them. I don't think we, need to say, why couldn't have God done it any other way?
Yeah. So what you're kind of invoking here is like some skepticism about what's possible and not possible for God. It kind of sounds like what you're saying is something to the effect of like, maybe it's not possible for God to have avoided this and still get everything that he wants. But if that's true, then what you're saying is that our intuitions that God could have, I don't know, like covered these rhinoceroses in like a force field and then allowed them to move out of the way so that them and their children, they didn't have to like watch their babies die and then, themselves like suffocate to death. If you're saying that that's not possible for God for some reason, well, then it just seems like it also seems like we end up in this spot where nothing could possibly be evidence for God at that point, because you're saying that we can't know anything about what is and isn't possible for God. Like, why should I think that it's possible for God to, I don't know, send his son Jesus down, but it's not possible for God to shield the rhinoceroses without losing out on some greater good?
Well, I would take it a step further and say that this reality was perfectly fabricated and that there was no alternative. So when we say things like, this gets a little bit grim and we're getting a little bit abstract with it, but for the sake of the conversation, bear with me. I would say that pretty much any suffering that does exist, if it's at least grounded in some sensibility, I'm not saying like things that are, absent of God, and we're going to start getting into the Gospels, and it would be a little bit complicated. But essentially, what I'm saying is that everything is a means to an end, and there is kind of a purpose or a reason for all the things that would occur. So, the things like a death of a loved one may result in, the exponential growth of a relative, to figuring out a cure for this, or for the emotional and spiritual development. I think there's also other spiritual arguments that essentially assert that we're living in a reality where all of these experiences are meant to develop our deeper understanding of the soul and of the spirit. So these things would kind of like be an additive process for the I guess final goal of our education, so to speak.
Yeah. This is implausible to me for, I guess like it just seems like there are obvious alternatives that God could do. God could have included better moral teachings in his book, but instead he has like basically like the Bible on its best day, morally speaking, is basically exactly what's in all of the civilizations around them. It's what's in China hundreds of years earlier. It's what's in Greece hundreds of years earlier. And then you compare it to modern day moral philosophy today in terms of the number of cases that it's capable of accounting for, and it just gets like completely trounced. Like the golden rule gets like blown the fuck out by Kant's categorical imperative. So if that was the idea, is that God is trying to give us moral guidance, he's trying to develop our moral character, well, it just seems like he's doing a pretty bad job of it. So even that doesn't seem like it could be the explanation. It seems like that explanation fails, even on its own
I would
terms.
disagree. The reason why I would disagree is maybe you have heard of this before, but they say that Christ is the word. So the best education essentially is to kind of follow the account of Christ and try and follow what his image and his teachings are. Yes, I do, everyone, at least most Christians, or a lot of Christians, rather, I don't want to speak for everybody, would say that you should follow the Bible because it is the word of God. But the reason why I'm pointing to following Christ rather than, what's a good analogy I could use? Like kinesthetic, is that the right word? Kinesthetic learning rather than, reading on a book. I feel like I've learned the most through experience rather than reading it on a book. I think God sure could have provided as, many laws for us to figure it out. But I think we have tons of laws within, here's a good example, within our society that we all say we should do. We have some sort of normative, moral fabric that we're supposed to do. But as we know, as humans, and the human condition is that we are inherently hypocritical and we're liars. We can't even trust our own senses for the most part, because we say we believe things and then we do another. We say we love and then we hurt, for whatever purposes. I think the reality is that there probably isn't anything that ever could have been written in the way that you were expecting it. And that is for a reason. I think experience is truly the strongest educator, and that's why we're in this reality that has consequence, and that's why consciousness is the way that it is. And I go back to my original point, which is that we couldn't have had any other universe. There couldn't have been any other situation. God has this reality for an ultimate purpose, and things like suffering, yes, are necessary the same way that consciousness is necessary.
Mm,
Um, I don't think that we could have had this reality without consciousness.
I see. So you're saying that kind of all the events are necessary for the like some like ultimate good?
Um, I would feel like yes. I would say
Look at
yes.
that. You came around to compatibilism. You're saying it couldn't have been some other way. That there couldn't have been like some other like, we have a deliberative choice, but you don't have like a genuine choice. Like what happens is necessary in order to achieve the greatest good. This is kind of my take on it. But I also think that from like the theistic perspective, this leads to just moral absurdities. If this is the
Well,
best possible
I saw
world,
what you did there. But okay, so let's go with the moral absurdities.
yeah,
Why do you
if
feel
this
that
is
way?
the best possible world, then you're saying that the world wouldn't have been a better place if the rape of Non-King didn't happen, that the world wouldn't have been a better place if, I don't know, the Holocaust didn't happen. And that just seems like it can't be true.
Well, I would agree with that. Certain instances could have, desirably been another way. Um, I'm not saying that we're locked into like, this or that, like we're stuck into it. There's obviously, at least from my perspective, there would be some sort of variance, and that's where free will comes in. That we could, choose to do one thing over another, where we are the object of those decisions. That it isn't just reduced to chemical processes. But yeah, like things such as rape or things such as murder, we have a choice in whether we do or do not do those things. And I think that's the point, is to determine the difference once those things do occur. If it hadn't occurred, you wouldn't know the difference. If bad didn't exist, how would you know good? So for if like as we've said before, in every possible reality, rape would always be bad. But if rape never existed to begin with, and that wasn't an experience that did exist, we wouldn't have known the difference to begin with. And I think that knowledge is actually important for our development. Um, would I say I would prefer a reality that didn't have rape to begin with altogether? I think that was kind of God's choice to begin with. But of course, as you know, the story goes, we ate the apple and whatever, we disobeyed. And this is the reality that we have come to. We're cursed with knowledge, and here we are. Just as
Oh,
Daniel said.
I think that this is probably a mistake because then if you're saying that if you're positing like a literal fall of man, well, these views just get crushed by all the evidence for evolution. There's just like overwhelming evidence for evolution. Like at that point, it's
You,
like which one's more plausible, Christianity or evolution? And evolution wins by like basically the entire field of biology is what evolution wins by.
okay. So you're saying like the story of Adam and Eve could never work with evolution? Why is that
That it
true?
couldn't be like literal true, that there's no death, for example, prior, or that humanity starts with 2 humans as opposed to an entire population.
I mean,
Also,
just as you
there
said before, I could be compatibilist and just say, I could be taking it metaphorically, I could be taking it literally. I think when we
Mhm.
look at these stories, like there's, a direction that we could, take for either situation. Um, I
Mhm.
think the story of the tree kind of gives us some glean into how consciousness and suffering works, and I think that's the most valuable gem of the story.
Yeah. Well, I totally agree that this is like a move that you can do in the same way. Like you can say that your position is compatible with the literal reading and the metaphorical reading. The problem is that kind of neither of them is going to help you here. The literal reading just gets crushed by the evidence for evolution. It's extremely implausible. Um, and then if you take the metaphorical reading, well, then it doesn't explain why God created a world, why God chose to actualize the rape timeline as opposed to the no rape timeline.
Well, like I said before, I don't think it could have been any other way. Kind of like with the whole trolley thing. It's like you either choose to save one, um, or what is it? 1 or verses 5. But I think you get what I'm saying.
Could God have created any possible timeline?
Could God have created any possible timeline? Yes, but you're going into kind of like uh, is a qualitative argument for this. I think it would just become confusing if you were to approach it from this lens.
Well, the argument, I can show you my cards. I'll lay them out on the table. God can create any possible timeline. Presumably, there's some possible timeline where we just all, through our own free will, choose not to rape. Just simply nobody ever chooses that. So there's that possible timeline. So God could have chosen the no rape timeline.
I mean, who's to say it wasn't a timeline that did or didn't exist? We just don't have evidence for the other. You know, you
We
could
live in
say
the
like
rape
what
timeline.
we do, but we haven't lived in the non-rape timeline. So
Mhm.
it's kind of like, you know, do unicorns exist? You know, we haven't been in a reality where we've perceived one.
Yeah. If the claim is that it's
So
not possible for us to have not chosen to do these things, that's fine, but it just seems pretty catastrophic for the idea of free will.
so here's another presentation that I could say. That reality hasn't been revealed to us by God. It could have existed. It may have existed. It may even exist now in some sort of parallel aspect that I'm not aware to. My main argument is that the reality that we're in right now is for a particular purpose, and your arguments against it, you know, whether God could have chosen another reality, it could be the case, and God most likely has a reason for why he has or hasn't created that reality. And we have no evidence to say it does or doesn't exist. Um, just not one that we perceive, right? Because you've spoken before about the many worlds concept, right?
Yeah, although I don't think many worlds is going to be attributable to something like modal realism, with respect to like something like libertarian free choices. Like, I don't think that there's some world out there where we like just never chose to rape. Like, I don't think that that's going to be some branch of the wave function where we just all exist and we've simply never chosen to rape.
So
Maybe
you think
there's some
you just
branch.
you get into a moral conundrum. I get what you're saying. You get into a moral conundrum, like, you know, God could have just chosen any other reality. But here's the point. I think the point is that we're supposed to choose that reality, no?
So, okay, but is it a possible reality? Is there a possible timeline where we have simply just never chose to rape through the entire timeline?
Never chose to.
Yeah.
I think yeah, I would say probably not, but it's possible or plausible. The reason why I say probably not is because the story goes is that, you know, we're sinful and we are undeserving. So essentially, we're going to commit sin because that's within our nature, and we're supposed to realize that sin and change from it. I think it's necessary for us to experience the sin in some aspect. You know, there's a whole spectrum of sins that we experience, right? So I think we're supposed to learn from those experiences in some aspect, and the free will and the agency that has been given to us, we're supposed to choose the alternative. It is within our power. So I think I would say literally from the story, probably not. But what it feels like to me from the reality that we have and that I accept consciousness and agency, it feels like to me that yes, we could have chosen a reality where that didn't exist. It's just unfortunately, one of us decided to be like, hey, why don't we do this? You know, some wise guy. And now here we are, right? But my gut tells me, you know, if we have free will and we can choose, and we could choose to do better. I mean, wouldn't you say that? I think you would say that we could choose better, or at least I would hope most people would say they choose better. My
Yes,
problem
certainly
with
I don't think
human
anyone's forced to.
compatibilism, right? I mean,
Like the
I feel
rapist,
like
that is, yeah.
right. So I mean, that's why I kind of have issues with compatibilists and hard determinists that would say, and I've had arguments with plenty of people who will say, well, all of our actions are a result of mathematical and chemical processes, which I think are true on some level. But I do think that we probably could have. I think the answer is that yes, Ian. I think we probably could have chosen a reality. I think the reality is possible within our means simply because we have consciousness and agency. So really, I think that's our fault, not necessarily God's fault.
Well, I guess I'm a bit unclear because I feel like I'm getting both answers. I'm both getting the answer that there is a possible timeline where all humans freely choose not to rape, but also there isn't that possible timeline where all humans freely choose not to rape.
Well, I think so. Here's easier way to say it. I think sin could have branched into an infinite amount of different directions. I think one way that I like to look at it, philosophically speaking, when I'm grounding consciousness and free will in an eternal rational mind, if God is all things and that's also the universe, and we know that the universe can extend infinitely and that there's an infinite amount of choices and different experiences that could exist or could have existed, then it is plausible to say that consciousness not only is necessary, but consciousness also chooses internal no, or chooses physical states or quantum states. So we are actually, in a metaphorical way and a literal way, we kind of choose the metaphysical states that exist.
So prior to God selecting a specific world to create, did God know what was going to happen in the timeline of the world that he chooses to create?
Does God? I mean, God knows all things, so I would probably say yeah.
Yeah. So could God have just chosen a timeline where, I don't know, sin never enters into the world? Is that a possible timeline where
Repeat
sin
that. Sorry,
is there
I
is there a
missed one word.
possible timeline where sin never enters into the world?
I think we had that.
But is there a possible timeline where the entire timeline is like sin never enters into the world?
Um,
Was that one of the
no,
options
because
that was available to God when he was like looking at the timelines that he could create? Is there some one where sin never enters into the world?
yes, but it wouldn't be our reality, and that's an important distinction to make. That he could have chosen another reality, but the one in which we have consciousness that in some way is made in the image of God, it wouldn't have been this one. And I think that's the point, because if God is omnipotent, then God could also choose all evil. So for us to kind of like get on some sort of pathway where we're I guess pure or in some way closer to God, then I think it would logically follow that we should be able to have a distinction of those alternatives. So I think here's my sense of it. For our reality to have any sort of logic foundation, there needs to be a this or that option. We cannot choose to do good. We cannot choose not to rape if rape does not exist itself or the action of raping, right? And I think that's the point. God could also have, done all whatever reality, but it's this reality that was set for a purpose. And I think that's kind of where it all points in that direction, that it is up to us as conscious agents to choose the metaphysical states.
Yeah, this leads to like instant contradictions. Check this out. Okay, so God is all powerful and necessarily all good. If God is all powerful, then God has the power to do evil. If a being has the power to do something, then it's possible for them to do that thing. If God is necessarily all good, then it's not possible for God to do evil.
God is all powerful and necessarily all good. If God is all powerful, then God has the power to do evil. If a being has a power, then it is possible for them to do that thing. If God is necessarily all good, then it's not possible for God to do evil. But that's just reducing God to your normative. I think it's illogical to try and have some sort of sovereignty, moral judgment on something that is incomprehensible. So I think it's just not. I think that I'd probably reject. I'd probably reject two in the way that you're trying to rationalize it.
Didn't you just say this like a second ago, that God has the power to do evil?
Yes, but not in the way that it would make God evil, because your point two leads to essentially that God would
No.
have some capacity for evil. No.
The contradiction specifically isn't that God is evil. The contradiction is that it's possible for God to do evil and that it's not possible for God to do evil.
Yeah, and that's a logical contradiction that limits God to our normative understanding of confines that we would only be subject to.
Are you saying like God can be contradictory?
Um, in the way you're thinking it, yes, actually.
Okay, I wish you would have led with that. I mean, I just think that those views are false. I think contradictory views are false.
Why do you think if something can be the foundation of everything, why couldn't it break, the laws of physics? So if God can create any reality, then why wouldn't he be able to break some of his own laws?
Well, so we need to start with the laws of logic. Contradictions are false, strictly false. If you arrive at a view, if you're evaluating a view and you arrive at a contradiction in that view, well, that view is false.
That's only encompassed in the reality that exists within God. There could be an infinite amount of realities that have different laws of physics that are subject to scrutiny or some form of evaluation. I
I'm
think
I'm not talking about
like
laws
how,
of physics. I'm talking
well,
laws of logic.
so here's an example. Have you? I mean, I don't know if I can say this. There is a substance that you ingest that is highly psychedelic in
Mhm.
nature. Am I able- I'm
You
trying
probably
to-
can't say the word, but no, I've never done those. I also don't think that there are any logical contradictions. Like there are like weird things that you haven't experienced before.
Well,
You
right.
know, things
There's weird
behaving in
things.
ways that they don't normally behave. There are what appears to be violations of maybe laws of physics. There aren't
Right.
violations of laws of logic.
Well, like a square circle. It's a violation of laws of logic.
Yeah, I
Right.
agree. But
Sure.
there aren't like people aren't hallucinating squared circles.
There certainly are. There's been many accounts of like the specific psychedelic that you produce when you sleep. There's a lot of accounts of experiencing different shapes that would be incomprehensible to our natural reality. And I would say that there's probably layers of these different levels of realities that all exist, I don't know, somewhere under the umbrella of, God. I don't know how to, verbalize it, but I think you know where I'm going with it. I think that the contradictions in the way that you perceive them, that shouldn't be violated, probably can be violated in some, I don't know, different dimension. Now, I don't know much about this to argue this, but I'm just rationalizing the concept that I think it's not imperative to me, or it's not clear to me that some form of contradiction could exist in a plane that isn't, relative to the universe that we perceive.
I guess like here's the problem with a contradiction is that you're claiming when you affirm a contradiction, you're basically saying that you're wrong. In order to say a contradiction, you're saying this thing, but also not that thing. So to say that God has the power to do evil, or that it's possible for God to do evil, and then also that it's not possible for God to do evil, you're saying that you were wrong in your first statement, that when you said it was possible for God to do evil.
Well, I'm going beyond that. What I'm saying is that there's a limitation in the language. I think it doesn't really serve the actual potency of, omnipresence to begin with. Because I think, here's what I would say. I would say the fact that we're coming to some sort of conundrum that is very difficult to rationalize. I think we should look beyond that rather than just full stopping. I think we're already trying to defeat the possibility when we already say, oh, well, that's not logically possible. Like God, could God create a rock that he couldn't move? I think is one thing that you've said before.
Mhm.
We immediately throw the baby, out with the bathwater. But I would just
We
like
should.
to accept the challenge. I don't think we should. I think the whole point of the dialectic is to try and come to some sort of truth that can go beyond just our basic understandings. I think our mind hasn't quite, to be quite frank, it hasn't evolved to the point to where some of those questions could be answered. I do think that we're actually getting closer. I don't think in our lifetime we could, answer things like contradictions, but we actually have observed, metaphysical and physical laws that break, like the Planck length, or like,
Wait, don't give me examples of like physical laws. What we're concerned about is like the most permissive laws, which are laws of logic.
yeah, laws of logic that are bound by linguistics. I think that's the problem, is that you're verbalizing to me something like, we're imagining a reality where God could create a rock that he couldn't move. Like it's kind of like
And to be clear, you would just affirm
weird.
that, right? Like you would affirm that God has the power to make a rock that's so heavy that he can't lift it, and he has the power to lift that rock too.
What I would say, uh, naturally, it doesn't make sense. It's incoherent, and I think it's actually a big stopping block for a lot of atheist thinkers, because I think they get stuck on the linguistics, and things that are clearly irrational for the sake of defeating the argument. But it's just, I don't know if it was Aristotle or Plato, where a lot of times they say, he would struggle with debaters because he felt like debaters were always just trying to win. And I'm not just trying to win or try and obfuscate the fact that it doesn't make sense that God could create a rock that he couldn't move. What I'm saying is, engaging in such rhetoric is futile. And I would say that we would probably get to more fruitful outcomes if we were able to try and expand our reasoning to come to some sort of conclusion where we could push the dialectic forward beyond what our greatest philosophers have ever imagined.
But what tool are we supposed to use to do this reasoning? Are we supposed to use reasoning?
I think reasoning, but I think we have to get to another form of evolution. I think
Are we supposed to
using
logic it out, or are we supposed to, or is it just like vibes? How are we supposed to figure out
well,
what's true and what's false?
I think you bring a great point. And you said it in a very, very funny way for your viewers. But what I would say is, I think consciousness and mathematics are probably the best tools that we can use to try and explain anything in our natural reality, or even explain God, and also come to some sort of explanation for conundrums. But I don't think we should just inherently say, well, that feels not true, which I think you sometimes do.
I don't think I say that feels not true. I think that I will declare something false when it's like a contradiction. I mean, there probably are times where I say, that seems implausible based on things like prior knowledge. So maybe that's like fair enough. But in this specific example, the problem is that we have a contradiction on our hands. In order to talk through, in order to reason through, we need some tool that guides our reasoning. How do we know when we've taken a wrong turn somewhere? On my view, where logic holds across all propositions, we can determine that we've taken a wrong turn somewhere when it becomes true that there's a contradiction in the view. If the view is contradictory, we have to retrace our steps. We have to turn back, and we have to figure out what to give up. Are you like proposing, if you're rejecting logic, are you proposing something to replace that role in the conversation process?
No, I think classical logical descriptions are required. I think we need them. I mean, we use logic for experiments as an example, but I think the problem is that, I guess, logic can sometimes be limiting. I mean, like the statement that you said before was that you hold logic, I guess, is the foundation for everything. And if something isn't acceptable to,
For
I
reasoning.
guess, logic, then it just doesn't apply.
Yeah, when I'm reasoning through a worldview, if something turns out to be illogical, that is like it entails a contradiction, well, at that point I know I've made a mistake somewhere, that I need to evaluate the premises that led me here, the presuppositions that led me here. I need to lay them all out and figure out which one I'm giving up.
Right. Okay. Um, so you don't think there could be a reality, or there could have been a reality where, you know, I guess there are different laws of logic?
Definitely not.
Well, okay. Well, here's the
There's
thing,
quite
though.
literally not a logically possible world where this is true. Because logically
Well,
possible
it's not
requires
one that
those
you
laws of
perceive.
logic. There quite literally aren't logically possible different laws of logic.
So let me put it this way, in I guess an easier way. We both acknowledge that logic is a framework that we use to describe reality, and that's your favorite one, right? Reality itself, reality, we're talking about everything, the universe, is not obligated to behave according to our intuitive categories.
I agree
What
with
you
that.
are using, right, and this is what I'm saying, is that you are using your intellect that is based on millions and billions of years of evolution, but it can't contend necessarily, and the reality is not obligated to behave in the way that we understand logic. So I wouldn't necessarily trust a human with their evolution to fully explain reality, at least not yet. So I would, if humans betray their own morals, why should I trust your intuition with logic? It's
Mm.
just
Well,
it's
luckily you don't have to,
clearly
right? You could both
clearly a
trust my
problem.
intuition and not trust my intuition, right? Because after all, humans both betray their own morals and don't betray their own morals, as is both written in the Bible and not written in the Bible.
Right, but our assumptions about what categories reality must fit into
Mhm.
were wrong, not that reality,
And they were
is
also right, yeah.
contradictory. So,
No? Why not?
well, I don't think that you would necessarily be able to explain everything with your understanding of logic.
Yeah, I wouldn't be able to, but I also would be able to.
But that's what A is not A. You're confusing me now.
Oh, you're saying that A can't be not A?
That's what seems like you're saying.
So then we agree that we need to reason using logic.
Well, you're borrowing from my perspective. You're saying
How?
that you
Your
need to.
perspective is contradictory.
Well, what you just said was contradictory, but it's only contradictory in your worldview.
And yours. And if it's not, then why did you notice? What made you notice that what I was saying is nonsense?
Because I'm catching that you're pointing to the nonsense, but you're trying to borrow from the fact that I'm establishing that it's possible. But if you reject it to begin with, why is it a proposition that you presented in the first place?
What do I reject in the first place? What's the thing that
That
I
there could be
reject?
that contradictions could exist.
I don't think. Oh, sorry. The reason why I think that contradictions can't exist is because you are declaring yourself wrong. You can also, in like the classical sense, you can just lay out the definition of all these terms and then just determine on a truth table that indeed this is a law
Right.
of
So
logic
so
that
then I would
holds.
just reject the thing that you said earlier, that you said you could explain it and you couldn't explain it.
Mm.
Now, the reason why I'm not affording it to you, because I'm operating in your worldview. I'm not granting you that because you don't accept that contradictions could exist. So why would I afford you that opportunity?
Oh, well, you don't need to because, by you not affording it to me, you both are not affording it to me and affording it to me. So
I mean,
then the
in my
opportunity goes
worldview,
through.
worldview,
Yep.
but not in
So
your
then the
worldview.
opportunity goes through on your worldview. So
So
you
then
do
you would have
afford
to.
it to me.
I could afford it to you if you accept my proposition.
Well, lucky for you, I both accept it and don't accept it.
Under my worldview, but
Yeah.
what about your worldview?
Yeah, so luckily you can afford it to me. So in my
But
worldview,
you,
I afford the parity argument to myself. On your worldview, you afford the parity argument to me. So luckily we're in agreement, except gosh, we're actually not in agreement because you both afford it and don't afford it.
but do you believe in contradictions, or are you just word playing?
I obviously don't believe any of this. This is like nonsense.
Well, it's because you're not able to contend with the possibility that logic might have some sort of breakdown from your understanding. I think the problem is that humans a lot, they try and lean on their senses, when I think that's what Donald Hoffman was arguing, is that our senses don't really perceive reality as the way that it actually is.
Logic
So
isn't empirical. This has
logic,
nothing to do with sense data.
but we derive outcomes based on logic plus our senses. No?
Okay, I don't know. What do you think the laws of logic are? And what's the sense data that corresponds to them? Or have we been having an argument about like a category of thing that you don't know?
So how would you define
Okay,
logic?
listen,
in
you
your
should
worldview?
study up on this. I'll talk to you later. Gosh, whatever. I should probably, that's probably the first question I should ask people when they start rejecting logic. Grimlock, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Go eat some soup, you sickie, and hydrate. Okay, I will. One sec, let me get my various pens. Wow. Even just bending down, stooping down to get those pens, I'm now totally woozy. Simeon Shurin, thanks so much for the super chat. Consciousness is a memory system from 2022. Great paper on proposing a new/revised theory of consciousness. A neurologist, a philosopher, and a psychologist wrote it, and I really think you'll enjoy it. Maybe I should force my girlfriend to read this with me because she is a neuroscience grad student. Maybe I was unfair with the last guest. Maybe I could have been nicer. Maybe I could have said, you know, it's great to talk to you, but unfortunately you've rejected logic, so I don't think this will be fruitful. 35 pages? My genuine reaction to seeing how many pages this paper is, it's probably not that many pages. Yeah. But I appreciate that, Simeon Shurin. Thanks so much for the super chat. Relax with Russell ASMR. Thanks so much for the super chat. No, Ian, God has a mind. In fact, he's the eternal rational mind, but saying God has a mind is bad for my argument, so I'm going to describe a mind by saying schmind and pretend that I've gotten past the problem. Huh. How do you account for minds? Well, in my worldview, we account for minds because they all come from the schmind. And the schmind is just like a being that has the disposition and a desire to produce minds. Duh. Minds come from the mind fairy. The being with the desire and power to produce minds, obviously. Guts, thank you so much for the GOAT trophy. Appreciate that. Aquarius Cowboy, thanks so much for the super chat. I gotta do way more evil to max out the good stonk. True. Absolutely. Worm Goblin, thank you so much for the $5 on Venmo. He crushed me, but did he both crush me and not crush me? You know, I got cooked, but did I get both cooked and not cooked? Sinfin, answer that one. I just want to know if I got cooked and not cooked. Worm Goblin, thanks so much for the $5 Venmo. Blitz has seen Avatar 2009 23 times. Gosh, no, he hasn't. That's simply not true. Say Cap, that's not true. Dr. Blitz didn't do that. I won't let you slander Dr. Blitz's good name, Worm Goblin. And Kabuto, thanks so much for super chat. When's the next book club on virtue ethics? I had to cancel this last one because I was sick, but The next one will be next Saturday, 8 p.m. EST. That's my plan. A list. Thanks so much for the super chat. It's true. Almost no one knows what formal logic actually is. You should definitely ask that as soon as logic comes up. People LARP and say that they are talking about like the 3 laws of logic, which is fine. I think you can work with that. Okay, I'll bite. Hey, how's it going?
Oh my God, I did not think you would call me up.
Yeah, how old are you?
I'm 26.
Yeah, what religion?
I don't really have one.
Okay, do you believe in God?
It depends on how you would describe God. But wait, before we
Like
start,
an ultimate mind? Do you believe in an ultimate mind?
yeah, I do. Before we start though,
Sure.
you are way more intelligent than I am. So can we not like fall into obscurantism? Like, can you keep things like?
If I say a word that you don't know, you're welcome to ask clarification. I don't try to use big words to obscure the point. In fact, I make active effort to try to clarify everything. But what makes you think that God exists?
Well, just the basis of our reality. So like not a God of the gaps explanation, but more so there's a level of randomness to our reality, but there's a lot of cohesion that seems to be placed there by laws of physics and or electromagnetism and things like that. Like certain things cause certain reactions, and if you introduce certain variables in a precise way, you get a consistent outcome. So, like just based off of that, it seems that there is some type of order or structure to our reality in a sense, like not negating that there is randomness, but there seems to be an overall like structure to everything, not just like in the 3D, I guess that's what we use in space and time, but outside of space and time too, which we know is a thing. So yeah, that's why I kind of believe in the overall mind, if that's the best way to put it.
The mind kind of comes out of nowhere. You're saying that on some scales things are random, on some scales things are like deterministic.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, a mind? I don't know why the mind follows.
Because like for us, like as human beings, like you're using a pencil or a pen, there's paper. By the way, bro, the beard, the black shirt, the chains, like I like this look for Ian.
Thanks,
But
I
back to the
appreciate
topic.
it.
What was I saying again? Oh yeah. So there are things that us human beings that we all acknowledge that humans have minds. Some people think we are the mind. That's a whole different topic. But with using our minds, we can observe in our reality that in order for something to exist in the physical outside of nature, someone has to kind of have a thought process to bring it into reality. So like the pen, for example, like someone created the pen. Like the pen didn't always exist. The idea existed in their mind before they brought it into reality. So that's kind of the basics. I'm not saying this is all being true. It's just like, it's a pretty rational perspective to have if you look at reality. Like a lot of things we see, like cars, for example, someone had the idea in their mind first. It didn't exist in our physical plane. And they used their understanding to bring the thing they had in their mind into our reality. Maybe it's not the exact idea they had, but they kept on working towards it until it actually made no sense to actually function in our reality. So like, I'm not saying I'm right. I'm just saying that's how I got to there being a mind behind all the order in our reality.
So I think that there's probably 2 problems here. The principle that you seem to be appealing to is something like, you know, whenever we see something brought into reality, it's brought into reality by a planner, by a mind. The biggest problem with this is that we see things get brought into reality all the time by non-minds. For example, the rain gets brought into reality by the cloud gets brought into reality via like evaporation. So it just seems
But I
like
said
we have
outside of
tons of
nature.
counterexamples.
So the example I use, I said outside of nature, we know that things that exist in our reality came from a mind. So that's why I made the distinction of saying outside of nature. So like what you just used it. So I'm saying,
What are the outside of nature things?
So when I say outside of nature, I mean like you brought up rain. Like obviously there
Oh,
are
sure. Yeah.
cloud seeding is a thing. So humans can use cloud seeding to create rain. So we know that we can actually influence that. But I was saying outside of trees growing, sun, like precipitation, gravity, electromagnetism, all these things, outside of those things that exist outside of without human humans intervening, I was saying that things in our reality we know of, like a computer, the device we're speaking on right now, it came from someone's mind. Like, is that at least like something you can agree to that it
Yeah, I
came out of
agree
someone's
that
mind?
computers are products, like they're intentional products. But
Okay.
in terms of like what specifically do you think that God brings into existence? Because
Well,
it doesn't seem like you
so
could say that he brings nature into existence, because the principle that you're talking about only applies to things that are outside of nature, things like cities and buildings and cars. But
yeah,
then we know where all the cities and buildings and cars come from, and it's not God.
no, but that's humans creating. Because to believe in like the ultimate mind, right? That in order to believe in the ultimate mind, you have to subscribe to the belief that our minds stem from another consciousness, right? Once again, I'm not saying this is
Mhm.
true. Also, all that stuff I said about cooking and shit was to piss you off to get me on here. I know I can't fucking cook you. I just wanted to say it to get to talk. But
Fair play, fair play.
so
I'll do anything for content. So it doesn't seem to answer the question though. What is it
well,
that God brings into existence?
okay, for example, the human body, right? We describe most of the parts that make up the human body as systems. Um, well, how do you have a system, right? We know that a system, it operates a certain way. That's why we call it a system. How would it come about randomly? So like I'm not even like take God out of the equation, right? Let's forget about God. Um, in order for like our heartbeat, right? We don't actually control our heartbeat. Um, that just happens on its own. We don't control what cells turn into different organs within the body. We don't determine how any of that happens. Humans have we can't do that unless you're doing surgery or doing stem cell research. But outside of all that, before any of that existed, the body comes out a certain way. Not saying it's perfect every time. There are deformities and things of that nature, but in order for that thing to have a set structure to it, there seems to be like some type of organizing thing there. Now, let's not say it's God, right? But there is some type of awareness that certain cells have to know to be like a liver. Now, the question is
We have explanations
DNA,
for all of
genetic
that.
makeup. No, wait, just let me just I'm gonna finish the tangent real quick. We know the genetic makeup, DNA, and all these things, um, like play a factor in all of that. But how is that is the design that was chosen for our reality? We could have had like three legs and like two, I don't know, like two noses or some shit, but we don't. Like, and then our ears are able to basically get information from vibrations in air
Mhm.
to help us like hear things, right? So it's almost like the body was designed to interact with the 3D world in a way.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't really seem like it's random. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think this argument would have gone like hard as shit if it was the year 1800. Unfortunately, evolution is just one of the most well substantiated explanations that's ever been come up with in all of human history. We just have like a profound, overwhelming, like multidisciplinary level of evidence present for evolution. We have the evidence in
Hmm.
like the geological record with the fossils. We have the evidence
No,
in
I
the
understand
DNA.
that things evolved over time, but
Evolution explains all of this from
yeah,
start to finish.
okay,
Evolution explains how we go from the single
but
cell
epigenetics
to
also says that
this.
things, so like those mutations we talk about that leads to evolution, that happens like that can be things within that the realm or wherever the thing that's evolving is in, the environment affects how it evolves, which means like there's some type of information passed on. So like maybe it's really hot and the cells are picking up on, okay, it's really hot, so we need to evolve to sustain this heat, or it's really cold. Like there's still some type of information transference. This is how epigenetics works. Like there's some
I
type of
think you're
information transference
I
that
think you might be just a bit confused. So epigenetics isn't about epigenetics isn't natural selection. Epigenetics is about gene expression. So you have
yes.
certain genes that will get expressed in certain circumstances. So for example, let's say you're starving as a kid.
Mhm.
Your epigenetics might arrange themselves such that you have a lower metabolism for the rest of your life, and that you pass this lower metabolism down to your children.
Mhm.
Um,
But then
and
that's
that's
the lack
dependent
of
on
so
factor. But epigenetics
but the
come
environment led
deep
to
into
that
the
though, the person not
evolutionary
eating.
chain. These are not things
Yes.
that are going to be at the start of evolution. This is stuff that happens when you already have like a fully established genome,
Mhm.
or like a huge genome.
No, I understand what you're saying, but like the cause of that being passed down was the person not eating a lot, so their metabolism slowed down, which means the environment they were in played a part in that change
Mm,
coming about. So therefore, there is some form of like information transfer. You get what I'm saying? Like I'm not saying that someone
Yeah.
said in the chat cells don't think. I'm not saying cells
Yeah,
are
yeah. It
thinking.
has like a causal
I'm saying
effect on
that
like the genes, which ones get expressed. I think it's the
yeah. So
posons, like the
so
configuration of them, and then
yeah, and alleles
the
and all that.
passing
I
down of
understand.
that. Yeah, but evolution explains all of this, so I'm not sure what the problem is.
Well, I'm not negating evolution either. Like what I'm
Oh,
saying is that because evolution is obviously real and scientifically proven, so you can't say evolution is not real. That
sure.
would be idiotic. But what I'm
Then why do we
saying
need
is,
God?
well, that's the point I'm getting to. There isn't really like you don't even have to use the term God. All I like forget God for a second, right? I'm just telling you how I got to the place where I got to. And you're asking, so I'm trying to explain it to you. I'm not saying like this is God, right? I'm not going to the whole God of the gaps theory. I'm saying that in science right now we acknowledge that there is some form of information transference involved when it comes to evolution. That's why certain animals can adapt to be in the code because they know the code. Like the animal itself might not know what code is, but the cells that make up that animal, they understand that okay, we need to do something in the future to make sure that this thing stops fucking us off, basically. So I'm not saying that's God. I'm saying there is some type of information transfer going on because how would they know which genes to activate to do what type of what things will have the best survivability in certain environments? That's all I'm saying. I'm not going against genetics. I'm not going against evolution at all. I'm just saying that you can observe that there is some form of information transfer there. What do you want to call it? Consciousness, or I don't know what you want to call it, but I mean to denounce that that's even a thing. I don't know. I want to hear how you would explain that away.
So it's not even clear to me what the data point is. What is the thing that God explains that we can't otherwise explain?
Well, I told you we're not going to God right now. I was going off of like how there seems to be some type of awareness and like in there has to be some type of awareness in order for evolution to work the way it works. Like for things to this is how evolution is explained to us, right? I'm oversimplifying because we can't get all of this into this one conversation. And we'll be talking forever. This is like years of study. We can't fit into one call on TikTok.
Sure.
But the way evolution works, they describe it to us is whoever had the mutation that was best fit to survive in that environment is the one that stays, that goes on in the future and their offspring can survive because
Yeah,
they
the most
actually
likely
can.
to, yeah.
Yes. Okay. So all I'm saying is that is a fact. We understand that. That's like just logical, right?
Yeah, it's
If you're in a place where it's a bunch of
statistical fact, yeah.
water, if it's something you're in a place where there's a bunch of water, and another version of a creature develop web feet, and they can like get across the water, like in the water faster, they can move opposed to someone like an animal that just has like toes. The ones who are in the water, when things get higher, where they have to move around to get food, they would survive because they can move in the water faster. Like
Yeah.
that's just common sense. Okay, so what I'm saying is, how is it if there is no type of awareness or consciousness involved, right? How is it that that genetic mutation even comes about in the first place? Do you get what I'm saying?
Oh, via something called
Because each
mutagens. Mutagens are what cause mutations.
yes, I
Most
understand. It's
mutations are
not
harmful. Some
yes,
mutations
but
are
what
helpful, and the mutations that are helpful are more likely to be spread to the next generation.
yes, and they're only there because they survived in that environment, right?
Mhm.
Right? That's what you're saying. But some mutations don't happen in other environments because it doesn't even make sense for that to happen. Like,
There are a
do
lot
you
of
get what I'm saying?
mutations that have no benefit, and then they get weeded out.
Yes. Okay. I don't think. I think you're.
So these mutagens produce a variety of features, most of them useless, many of them harmful, some of them helpful. The helpful ones are more likely to get spread throughout the population than
Mhm.
the harmful ones or the neutral ones.
Mm-hmm.
And then that explains how the entire population comes to have the helpful bits.
Okay. So how is that going against the observation that I proposed to you?
I'm giving you the non-God explanation of it.
But I didn't have God in my explanation either.
Based, so it's not evidence for God.
No, it was just more of, you're saying, like, the original point I made was that there seems to be some type of information transference between cells and the environment, or things like heat, for example, like I used earlier. Um, and they're saying, well, that wasn't the mutation to survive in a hot place was only one mutation that happened, and we just see that now because those people survived, or those creatures survived. And I was saying yes, but at the same time, a bunch of mutations could have happened that would not lead to that. And then mathematically, in order for that, out of all the options that can happen mathematically, for that one to come up that perfectly fits the environment, it's impossible. Even if we go off of the stretch of all of time, this has been proven. You go to the stretch of all of time, mathematically, it'll be impossible for that right mutation to happen at the right place at the right time.
And
consistently for
luckily,
all
I
these
mean,
different animal groups.
something that's
You
super
get what I'm
cool is
saying?
that it hasn't. There's no animal that is like the optimal animal for its environment. There just isn't one.
Of course. But there are mutations that are better suited in some environments that scientists even have acknowledged the chances of this mutation happening here
This
in
is
this
going
way
like
is
nowhere
almost impossible.
quickly. What's the data point that you think God explains, or that you think like naturalism doesn't explain?
The existence of order in our reality, like the way that
Order where?
our solar system, human beings. So the belief is that human beings exist and life exists on Earth because it was the perfect distance from
It's
the
not.
sun.
That's false.
That Okay, so why is it that Earth is inhabited by living creatures and other planets are not? Like, I'm not saying that I know
It's
the
going to be
answer.
a
I'm saying
different
why the
explanation
science.
for each planet. So for the other
Yeah,
planets in
it's
our
too
solar
hot,
system,
close to the
it's
sun,
because
too
there isn't
cold, far
water.
away.
There's
Yeah,
there are a lot of reasons, but trivial reason, they don't have the
but
water, they
they
don't have the
found proof
atmosphere.
that there was water on Mars at one point in time,
Yeah, they don't have like
or
water that
ice, or at
covers
least
the
ice.
entirety of it. So one thing that's helpful to find life, or for the formation of life, is
Yes.
you need like alkaline ocean vents to get the processes up and going. And alkaline ocean vents require oceans.
Okay. So, and you're saying that what's the thesis again? That the soup of a bunch of different non-living organisms had the perfect combination, which sparked life coming about on the planet. That's like
It
the
had a
thesis,
permissible
right? Because there's
combination.
biology, and then there's what's the word for that again? The word for that theory is a word for the study of
Abiogenesis?
abiogenesis. Yes, that's what I was talking about. So abiogenesis believes that there was a bunch of non-living organisms
Not
that
organisms.
I don't. I don't have the. I said I don't
It's
have the
just like
proper jargon.
molecules. Like they're like these.
Or,
So it's going to be like these organic compounds that are
uh-huh.
mixing and mashing, and then you have an RNA fragment that produces more copies of itself and gets
Mhm.
enclosed in a system. It gets enclosed in
Yes.
like a outer layer,
Uh-huh.
so it produces more copies of itself. The copies are slightly different each time.
How are the copies coming about? Because of so abiogenesis, that
The thing is
happens and then evolution
self-replicating.
starts.
It creates like new, longer chains of itself,
Okay, how?
and then those break off. It breaks in half.
I understand that. So the
It's like a
question is
structural
now,
thing.
if there's no, you're saying there's no order or consciousness or awareness to this. How is it mutating?
How's it mutating?
How does it
Because
even know to mutate in the first
So
place?
when this thing is building its structure, it's building more of itself via the structure, which is kind of based on like the
Mhm.
chemicals. Like these are the chemical bonds that this specific combination of chemicals forms. It will get long enough and then it will break, but the break will not be like an even break. It won't be an identical break. There will be like jagged parts of it. So then when
Mhm.
that one goes on to form new copies of itself, it's also going to have like the copies will be slightly different. There are these mutation-like effects.
Okay. So I understand how that comes about. The question is, how is it that those random things that came together to get us to get to the point where it's actually mutating itself, how is it aware of mutation in itself? Like, how does it
It's
know to
well,
do
who
that?
said that it's aware? And why would it need to be aware? You know, the cloud isn't aware that it's raining. It rains.
Yeah. Do you get what I'm asking though?
No.
So these random, what was the term you used? Like, I don't know the vernacular. I don't have the vernacular for
Like
this.
the
So
RNA fragments.
RNA fragments. So
It's like
isn't
self-replicating
RNA? So
RNA.
but RNA is a form of information, right?
Depends what you mean by information. If what by information you mean is something
Instructions,
like,
like DNA's instructions,
oh
right?
no,
So
I
what is
wouldn't grant
RNA?
that. I wouldn't grant that RNA in that form is like an
Well, I
instruction
don't
for
know. I'm asking
something.
what it is. So can you explain the difference between DNA and RNA?
No, I can't, but I can get like a biology person
Can we look it
too.
up right now? No, let's look it up right now. Let's go
Okay,
into this.
sure.
I want to learn more because you're actually
DNA
teaching me a lot of
versus
stuff, though.
RNA. DNA stores long-term genetic information in a double-stranded helix using deoxyribose, sugar, and thymine. RNA is typically single-stranded, uses ribose sugars, and substitutes uracil to carry out short-term instructions for building proteins.
Okay, so it is RNA is instructions.
It gets
in a
used that
sense,
way,
not
but it
not in the
isn't
way we use as
intrinsically
humans.
that way. That's how it gets
Okay,
used. The thing around it, the
I understand.
mechanisms
I
around
get
it
it.
build to express it that way, to use it as information.
Yes.
But it's not intrinsically information, absent the thing that interprets it.
Okay. So the thing that interprets the RNA, right? That's what you're saying. What
Mhm.
is that thing? In
I
the
think it's
abiogenesis.
in
What,
abiogenesis.
yeah, in abiogenesis, because listen, I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, right?
This
I'm
isn't.
just
Wait,
going
sorry.
off of
That thing isn't
logical.
going to be present in abiogenesis.
Well, okay, so just help me understand what you're
I think
saying,
that's the
right? Because obviously,
transcriber.
okay, and the transcriber has to know like how to transcribe the information in the RNA, right?
It doesn't need to
So
know
how
how to. It just needs to have the
the
capability to
ability
do
to,
so.
the
Yeah.
ability to.
Oh, it's
Okay,
the ribosome which interprets RNA.
RNA. Okay, and in abiogenesis, I know nothing about this, by the way. So I'm just trying to use my small brain and logic to get to this conclusion, understand what's going on. So obviously, I'm wrong as fuck. Um, so in abiogenesis, there was a bunch of RNA, like you said,
Yep.
RNA,
Yeah, a bunch of RNA
and
fragments.
random fragments, and then the fragments randomly, because it was a soup. It was just a soup of different things colliding back and forth over and over again until one collision happened, and then the ribosome was able to interpret information on these two different structures, and then they kind of came together and started
The
self-replicating.
ribosome isn't going to be there in the formation of the first cell. The ribosome comes later.
Okay, so then the RNA instructions that we agree they are instructions. They can't do anything on
They're
their own, but they
instructions
are
with the
instructions.
presence of something like, I don't know, like a ribosome, something to do like translation. But, you know, the mechanism turns them into instructions. They're information because of the mechanism. They aren't information prior to the mechanism.
Okay, so okay, let me see if I can summarize what you're saying right now. You're saying that in that soup, I don't know the technicality, so I'm just gonna say the soup because I'm not
That's
smart enough to
fine.
know
I know
what's
you
going
don't
on.
mean it in like a condescending way.
Yeah, exactly. In the soup, there was a bunch of random collisions. One collision happened in the perfect way not the perfect way, one of the ways, because it could have been infinite ways that could have happened,
Yeah.
came about.
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the ways that it can come about to lead to where we are now, trillions of years later, there was information in those different fragments, but this collision of fragments helped cause it to start interacting with the information.
Are you speaking of in terms of like the thing that does like the translation, like the thing that makes it information?
Well, no, so you were saying that the information is just there. It's just there's nothing acting upon it. That comes later, but the information is there because it wouldn't be RNA if it's not. Because based off the definition of RNA, with like you said, it is a set of instructions. It's not like DNA, but there are instructions there. So in order for those instructions to even be, I guess, activated to start doing self-replication, Like what causes that? Like what in the collision happened to have them like was it
That
like a
doesn't
puzzle
come from
piece?
any sort of like information intrinsic to it. All that happens is that these structures build like bigger and bigger versions of themselves. Like when they get new materials, it's going to start generating like a copy of itself that's like conjoined to itself with
Yes,
those
that like
materials in the
puzzle
same
pieces.
place, and then it'll break in half. And that's how it
Okay.
creates new copies of itself. That doesn't involve any of like the particularities of like what's actually
Okay.
there.
Okay. So they're
Whoa,
saying bring up
Carl
Snitch.
Bismarck.
Who
Is
is
that the
Snitch?
evil scumbag Carl Bismarck? Whoa, long time no
Everyone's saying bring
see.
up Snitch. You can bring up Snitch to
Yeah,
help explain
sure.
this to me
Yeah,
because I just
Snitch is going to be way better at explaining this.
Hey, um, how's it going? I just wanted to say RNA is not instructional. RNA is literally just, so if you know what ribonucleotides are, they're literally just nucleotides, but in the second position on the five-pointed ring that makes up the middle of the molecule, there's a little hydroxyl group on the second position, and that's swapped out for a hydrogen molecule in DNA. So it's literally just a difference in structure, but RNA is actually not only used for mRNA, but it can also be used as like a silencing mechanism for the regulation of expression, as
okay.
well as enzymatic properties. Specifically, ribosomes are considered ribozymes, where the RNA molecule folds in on itself and participates in enzymatic properties. And this is also seen time and time again in other ribozymes, where RNA can be used in that way. Additionally, it
I
can
think
be used as tRNA.
Wait, I think we're talking
Snitch.
about like the formation of like I don't know, I guess like what would have been like the RNA fragment for the first protocell.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Like
Okay.
RNA is not just considered like a instructional molecule or a fragment. More than likely, in the first protocell, RNA was actually acting as a ribozyme. We know this based off of one study.
Could you explain what those things are? I have no idea what this
Yeah,
means.
like I
Sure.
was gonna say you're over my
Sure,
head
of
with
course.
the technical terms.
So ribozymes are. Are you familiar with what an enzyme is?
Yeah, an
Yes.
enzyme helps like isn't that what helps the reactions go easier?
Yes, and RNA can actually do the same thing. It can fold in on itself and make these really complex, beautiful structures known as ribozymes, which are the same thing as enzymes, but instead of being protein, they're RNA. So in the same way that protein, it can be used to make enzymes, which can help drive reactions forward, RNA can fold and help drive reactions forward. And it was more than likely that like the first enzymes were actually ribozymes, and these were the things that helped drive reactions forward in the first protocells.
Snitch, can I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Well, first of all, you were shredded. That's crazy. That's you in the profile picture?
Yes.
Yeah, you shredded as shit. Good shit.
Thanks.
So, is there an energy transfer in this at all? Because you use so many terms, I'm confused as fuck. But like, the whole point I'm trying to get to is like this. Is there an energy transfer going on?
So energy is just the capacity to do work. When we're talking about like lowering the energy barrier in reference to enzymes or ribozymes, you're really just making the reaction slightly more favorable. And this isn't always due to an energy transfer. A good example of this is if the core of the enzyme has like a hydrophobic pocket, that just means that it's a molecule that hates water. And the outside of that molecule or enzyme is water loving or an aqueous environment like your cells. If you're trying to react to things that hate water, they're more
Mhm.
likely to react in a hydrophobic environment than in a
Okay.
hydrophilic environment where there's a lot of water around. And
Yeah.
so if the enzyme just has a hydrophobic pocket, it might drive the reaction forward, not necessarily due to any like ATP hydrolysis or energy transfer like what you're insinuating, but more so just it's a more favorable environment for that reaction to occur. And this is what we see in a lot of like very, I would say simple enzymes, because they don't require like an ATP binding pocket, which basically would bind that molecule, catalyze the hydrolysis of ATP, resulting in that energy transfer that you're referring to. So to put it simply, energy transfer in the way that we understand it in more complex biology requires separate binding pockets, which take up space. They're a lot more complicated, and it also relies on like the pairing of two reactions together. Whereas what I'm referring to is a more simpler version of what we would consider to be like the more simple enzymes, where it's really just making it a favorable environment for the reaction to move forward rather than pairing it
Okay.
with a separate reaction altogether.
What sort of
Okay, so
reactions would they have been doing?
So kind of like what I was referring to, where you're allowing two things that are either hydrophobic or hydrophilic to interact more favorably.
Mm.
Same thing with like acid-base reactions. Acid-base chemistry is really common in enzymes. We see this all the time. I'm pretty sure like acid-base chemistry is one of the things going on with hemoglobin, but when we're talking about really simple chemistry or really simple enzymes, they're more so going to be modifying like the environment rather than pairing like 6 different reactions together.
I see.
so back to the abiogenesis, like the theorem. Can you explain how, in layman's terms, how? Because now I'm understanding more. It's not just the information or instructions in the RNA, but it's the environment it's into that makes certain things react. Is what I'm getting from this. That would cause like different reactions to happen. Is that? Am I interpreting this wrong?
I mean, I would take it a few steps backwards, because the central dogma wouldn't be like it wouldn't be the first things going on. Like when we're talking about abiogenesis, the first thing going on would be self-replication, and that really just requires, based off of what we know now, a small polymerase ribozyme, which would be a polymerase is something that brings multiple small molecules called monomers together. That's why it's called a polymerase. You're polymerizing a small string of monomers. And a ribozyme being an enzyme but made of RNA. And so it's basically just a RNA strand that has been crunched together and folded in such a way that it can catalyze reactions. And we've demonstrated, there is a study called, if you literally Google a small polymerase ribozyme can replicate itself and its complementary strand, you should find the study. It's published in the journal Science, where they've demonstrated that the small polymerase ribozyme can not only replicate itself, but other molecules. And so something like this enzyme would likely have been inside of a protocell and likely would have contributed to the synthesis of more RNA strands inside of that protocell. And so when we're talking about like what a protocell is, it's just kind of a little, ever mix oil and water together?
Well, we really can't unless it's emulsified.
You just gotta shake it a lot.
Yeah. But you ever like try to mix it together and you see a bunch of these little bubbles?
Yes.
Yeah, so that's basically what a protocell is, except it's made of these special lipids called phospholipids, where instead of forming these really dense lipid droplets where it's just a bunch of fat, it's more so like a bubble, and inside can trap things like RNA, cofactors, and things like the small polymerase ribozyme. So the first protocells wouldn't be doing the central dogma. They would be self-replicating molecules, making a bunch of little tiny chemicals inside of them. And out of that, you get less concerted reactions that you see in complex life, and just a bunch of these random reactions occurring. And eventually you get the more concerted reactions like the citric acid cycle and like oxidative phosphorylation. But first you would get all of these random reactions going on all at once. It wouldn't be the most elegant or the most I guess it wouldn't be the most efficient thing going on, but it would be effective in what actually happens in the end, which is you have all of these protocells, billions of them, all in these really hot, chemically rich environments, performing all of these reactions. And as a result, the outcome is something that is capable of self-sustaining itself
replicating.
and capable of Darwinian evolution, which is just having DNA that can replicate. And
Over and over again.
yeah, so it wouldn't have been like,
oh yeah, you go from no central dogma to a central dogma. It's more so you go from some chemical reactions occurring in this really hot, chemically rich environment to more chemical reactions occurring to maybe
So,
self-sustaining and some DNA replication, and then you get the central dogma.
so the environment plays a part in which just humor me because I can't use half the terms used, but the environment does play a part in which different reactions are activated. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah,
Okay,
that's a
so can
really
I ask
big
you?
principal component in chemistry.
So you obviously have the micro aspect of all this down to an exact science. Now my question for you is: we know all these intricacies exist, but how is all this information packed into like how do we have like how do you from those self-replicating cells or I don't know the proper term, but the self-replicating things you're speaking about, how do they add new information to get to the point where we are now? Because there's a lot more information than those original ones. So can they create entire new instruction sets too?
Yeah, that's
Is that like a
exactly what I
thing?
was referring to. So that small polymerase self-replicating ribozyme not only synthesizes itself, but it's also plausible to assume that it can synthesize new information. So in the same way that DNA polymerase makes mistakes, which is the reason why we have things like cancer, new mutations, why some people are born and they may have blue eyes even though everybody else in their family has brown eyes. Maybe they have like a weird mole when everybody else doesn't. Like these
Mm-hmm.
things are considered to be mutations, and a lot of mutations are due to the fact that the polymerase enzyme, remember, like the enzyme that makes long strands of molecules,
Mm-hmm.
that
So it's a
enzyme is not
polymer
always perfect.
or
So
creates a polymer. Are you saying like it is?
DNA is a polymer. So DNA polymerase makes DNA, and that's what
Okay.
allows your cells to replicate
Okay.
because you need new DNA information in order for your cells to divide and to have two functional cells as the outcome. And so DNA polymerase, there's about 5 of them, I believe. All of them are not perfect. They make one mistake. I believe it's the error rate is 1 times 10 to the 7th, or no, 1 times 10 to the negative 9th to the negative 10th, meaning that it's like one mistake per 10 to the 9th, 10 to the 10th additions. And so
So
it's a small error rate, but when you think about how long DNA is and how small nucleotides are,
how many years
that's
it
a
had
lot
to
of mistakes.
evolve? So I have a question. Like, how does it end up? Okay, like for example, hearing, right? That's sound waves, vibration in air, causing us to be able to hear certain things, right?
I
That
would clarify that it's the sound waves brushing up against little villi that exist inside of your eardrum, resulting in the depolarization of specific neurons connected to your ears, and that
Mhm.
connects to the auditory areas in your brain, resulting in the interpretation of sound.
Yes. So that mutation,
That
why
that's not a
do
mutation. That's just a physiological function. The mutation that would allow for that, it would have been multiple thousands of mutations over a long period of time. It wouldn't have just magically occurred.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's the buildup of mutations. That's basically what evolution is, and that's how new information comes into play. We also can predict where these mutations are likely to occur.
Mm-hmm.
And given the fact that DNA polymerase makes more mistakes in areas with a bunch of repeats, this actually is very interesting because you would also see, like, if there's a bunch of repeats due to things like, for example, like telomerase enzymes and things like that, where there are enzymes that just tend to make repeating sections of DNA. Let's say those repeating sections of DNA were what first started in the first protocells. DNA polymerases, the first editions of them, would have made a ton of mistakes because they screw up around a lot of repeats. And so, like, that would be one hypothesis as to how you would get a lot of new DNA all at once. Let's say there was this one enzyme trapped in the protocell, made a ton of repeats inside of a DNA molecule, and then another enzyme that replicates all of that. It's going to make so many mistakes because it just does not fare well when there's a lot of repeats.
Okay. Got it.
Would you have anything else, guest? Otherwise, I should move on to other ones before I end stream.
Yeah, I think you should move on to another one
All right.
because I have so much things to research now.
Yeah, you should.
But
Snitch,
thank
you
you
have
so much for being cool.
Snitch, you have good videos on this, or like good video recommendations for this?
Books. You
Yeah,
know,
I have a little link. So I have like I compiled all my sources by now, so everybody can just take a look. If you go to the link in my link in my bio, and you scroll all the way down, it says sources for discussion. There's a free Google Doc, like no charge, anything like that. It has all of the titles of the studies that are referring to the things I'm talking about with their links. If you have any trouble accessing the studies, just let me know, and I'm happy to access them for you and show you like what I'm talking about.
I have a question for you, Snitch.
Shoot.
How does what study what like science is that? Was that biology and chemistry or biochemistry? Like what was that just now that you were like what you're explaining? What
It would be a
umbrella
mixture of
science?
all of it. So like how the body functions and how we hear things, that would be physiology. That's my field of study currently. Biochemistry, biology, and chemistry would be what explains like enzymatic processes, and those are also
How
prerequisites to what I study.
how does that like does your study have any because is it just a natural like the natural world like naturalism or does it account for like consciousness and awareness? Do you think that's even a thing or you think it's just generated by the body?
Well, I mean, we haven't observed any conscious human beings. So the way that we experience and live through consciousness and I guess like our understanding of awareness and intelligence, the humans' experience of intelligence, awareness, and consciousness, we have not observed that without a brain. So there's no evidence to suggest that it's anything other than the brain. We can even predict dreams and states of like how we would perceive somebody to be like thinking and all that other fun stuff. We can predict that looking at the brain and how it's active. And so combined with the fact that we haven't observed anybody without a brain who's fully conscious and aware, and also intelligent in the same way that humans are. And we also haven't observed anything of that sort without a brain. I would say that would associate a
Fair
pretty
point.
strong causal relationship.
That's a very fair point. Well, I appreciate time from both of you guys. I know Ian has to get more people up here.
Yep.
Thanks for
Hey,
having me
thanks so much for
on.
coming on up. Appreciate you.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for coming up.
And
You're welcome to stay if you want. It's up to you. But yeah, thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Thank you. I'll drop down into the comments. I just got a lumbar puncture, so I'm still recovering a little bit.
Oh no, I hate when I get my lumbar punctured.
Well, thank you for having me up.
Yeah, thanks for coming up. Appreciate it. All right, let's read some supers. Ryan, thanks so much for the super chat. Blaming your diet for your sickening turd play. Who's doing that? Who's blaming their diet? I have no idea. Okay. TMG Copper, thanks so much for the super chat. Hey, Ian, do you believe that the laws of logic are transcendental, the same across time? If yes, when is the law of identity? So, okay, I think this question's a bit confused because people get like a bit like ephemeral. Like, if by the laws of logic you mean like the propositions, well, it depends on your ontology of propositions. So maybe you're like a Platonist about propositions, in which case you're going to say propositions are true timelessly. In the same way that like the theist might want to say that God exists and that he exists timelessly. And if they try to say that that's like an inconsistency in your position, you can say that an inconsistency with theirs when they say that God exists, but it doesn't exist right now. It doesn't exist at this second. That's fine to say that propositions exist timelessly. If you're like a Platonist, if you think that they exist as like abstract objects, but maybe you think propositions are like mind dependent, and that what makes the laws of logic objective is that they're an abstraction of something that's objective and like necessary, namely like the structure of reality. Well, that one seems plausible too. So it's probably important to get clarification on what's meant there, and then the view. But I think that there are like multiple defensible views on this. Alexander Hurst, thanks so much for the super chat. Having fun in the chat. Thank you for the community. Absolutely. Thanks. Appreciate you. Level Your Minds, thanks so much for the Magnificent Mary subscription. I appreciate you. Big W. Thank you. Level Your Minds, thanks so much for the 3-month membership. Who needs Tri-Omni when I can have a Tri-Moon Mary? I don't get that. That went over my head. Okay. Let's go to the next guest. Some of these have been waiting forever. We'll see. We'll see. We will see. Hey, how's it going, Logan?
Hi there.
Yep. How old are you?
Doing well. I'm 30 years old.
And what religion?
Not sure.
Do you
I'm
thi-
sorry, it's a non-answer, but it's complicated. I'm a recovering Methodist.
But do you think God is real?
I feel an experience that pulls me to say yes.
Okay. What's the evidence that God is real?
The issue is, and this is where I thought it would be kind of a nice discussion to have with you on this, because I see you come at this with good faith, and you also have you seem to be well read, and I was watching Dr. Blitz stream earlier as well, and he gave a shout out to this stream, so I began watching.
Good.
One of the things that bothers me the most about these discussions, not like you in particular or something, but just in general, is there seems to be kind of a confusion by all parties about what. So for instance, I guess I want to come at this a bit more Socratically. I don't want to talk over you. I'm trying to, I have a bit of a problem with that in my personal life. So I'm really trying to dial that back. So my first question is, what's our working definition of God?
I take God minimally to be something like an ultimate mind.
Some ultimate mind, whether
Yeah.
it be, okay. So, and whether that be outside or, we're trying to be vague on purpose to kind of encompass everything. And another thing I appreciate is you guys like to use specific language. I do too, to try and get specific meaning. So one issue that I have is it seems to be kind of a conflation with these arguments with empiricism and an axiom for a framework of mind, a framework of thinking.
What do you mean by a framework? Well, first of all, I mean, I'm certainly not presupposing empiricism, but in terms of like a framework for thinking, what do you mean?
So again, I'm trying to not be so esoteric and vague, but it kind of ends up being that way. Is when somebody thinks of how to conceptualize the world. For instance, there was a guest on earlier who I vehemently disagreed with when he was saying God, is contradictory and all that. I'm thinking, well, that mustn't be true, because let's say we presuppose God. If we presuppose God as a base level axiom, when we can say that, okay, well, God mustn't be contradictory. He must be purely logic, like perfectly logical, perfectly rational, because that's what we see in the world around us. And it seems to me that when we talk about these kinds of subjects, I hear a lot of, okay, well, what's the evidence for? And the issue that I take with that, and the issue that I take when you said opposition only, it's the assertion God isn't real.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that I'm saying God is real. that's a very key component of what I'm talking about here. And if we were friends, maybe we would have talked about this before, and it's a lot easier for you to understand what I was saying. But we're meeting for the first time, and I'm glad to meet you. So first off, do you have any questions about what I just said, or does it seem kind of clear? I'm kind
Not
of a
at all. I
yapper,
have no
and I just
idea
kind of
what you
start
believe
talking.
based on what you just said. I heard. I
I
gotta
don't
be. You
either,
seem like a
man.
nice enough guy, but like, most of what I heard was like commentary about like debates about
Oh
God.
yeah,
But
I'm
I'm not really
sorry. I'm
interested
sorry.
in
I'm
like
sorry.
commentary. I'm interested
My
in like a debate about God.
yeah. Thank you for putting me back on track and grounding me here. It's more okay. I believe there could be. However, I believe there could be God. I don't think it. It's not that it doesn't make sense to say that God isn't real, but I don't think you could find that in the realm of empiricism, which is, and you went against that. What did you mean by that when you say you're not really in the camp of empiricism?
There are obviously forms of knowledge that we come to that aren't just direct sense data. There are like things that we're able to come through rational reflection, like certain mathematical truths that we arrive at through rational
Okay.
reflection. We're capable of like imagining things. Even
Okay.
if your world didn't have any sense data and was instead just like, I don't know, like the sensation of seeing green and then the sensation of seeing red, you might be able to, by thinking through those and putting those in like different sequences and combinations and lengths, maybe you'd
Right.
be able to determine like certain basic facts about the world. Maybe you'd be able to count.
Right.
I think that there's lots of knowledge that isn't empirical knowledge, but is there any evidence for God?
Is there any? I guess my argument is I'm moving to say that God may be more of a subjective experience than an what's the word? The experience of God would be more subjective than objective, if that makes any sense. And what I mean by this is when somebody's forming an understanding of, okay, how do we understand the world? And this is kind of what the experience that I have that kind of pulls me. I'm not sure why. I can't explain it personally, but what brings me to this is, okay, when I guess it's a sense of phrasing. So when we say, well, what is the nature of God? I would say, well, we can study that by looking at the world around us and at the universe around us, by working through logically, okay, how does all of this work? How do the laws of physics come to be? Or how do the laws of logic come to be? And you could
But
just
what
say
does that
they
have to do
are,
with God?
and it's as a framework of thinking. I don't think I see. This is where I get into the yapping territory, where I'm kind of moving towards a direction. It would help maybe if you asked a pointed question for me, so
Is
I
there
don't
evidence for
start
God's
making this boring.
existence? Do you think God exists?
What do you mean by evidence? And I'm not trying to
Something
be
that like
difficult, I
a
promise.
fact that raises the probability of a hypothesis?
I don't think there is.
Okay, then there's probably no discussion to be had, right?
Fair enough. And that's the thing, is I was like, you know what? I want to try and work this through with you. And it might be kind of boring, but if you wanted to move on to someone else, you can.
Yeah, hey, thanks so
But
much
I
for
do appreciate your time.
Yep, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Make sure you're double tapping on that screen, doing all that good stuff as we go to the very next guest. Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Hey, good evening.
Yep. How old are you?
21.
Yep. What religion?
I'm a Christian Catholic.
Okay, what makes you think God exists?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So, what do you think would be a sustainable and a form of evidence for you to believe that God is real?
Just like some fact or set of facts that raise the probability of God's existence to be above 50%?
That is what I'm like. What's like what? Because I can bring up something and then it will not be substantial for you enough. Evidence is in a way a bit subjective.
I don't know. Are you saying like the evidence is going to be subjective? I
No,
mean,
I'm saying the
you
evidence
know,
are.
hmm?
I'm saying the evidence that we provide to you, you may not see it as an evidence. So, for example, if I say the common existence of the universe is an evidence of God, of a creator.
Yeah, well, we could discuss that. So then at that point, we're looking for the best explanation for the universe. But there are a lot of non-God explanations for the universe. For example, the universe could be necessary, or maybe the universe comes about via some non-God universe creation process. So there are a lot of explanations for how the universe could exist that don't involve God. Why would I think that God is the best explanation?
Actually, the question you should be asking yourself is why would the universe be something that is necessary? Because it says it's necessary. So, what makes the universe necessary?
Well, you could take a lot of views on that. You could hold that, all possible universes exist. And because this one's a possible one, it also exists. You could hold that there is nothing but necessities, that, you could be a necessitarian about it. You could hold that the universe reduces to something necessary, like the wave function. Again, there are lots and lots of explanations that an atheist could take in terms of why the universe might be necessary. Why would God
Yeah, basically,
create the
you
universe?
did not see anything. You did not see anything about necessary on his own part. You're just saying necessary, necessary, necessary. So, if you are saying that the universe might be necessary, like what is the purpose of the universe being necessary?
Why would I think that something needs a purpose in order to be necessary?
Yeah, because you cannot be necessary without a purpose.
Why not?
Nothing can be necessary without a purpose.
Why not?
Why would it be necessary? The word itself, necessary, means it has an importance or a significant factor to something.
So
you cannot say something is necessary without a purpose.
I think it's necessary that 2 + 2 is 4, but I'm not sure that there's like some further purpose there.
It's not necessary that 2 + 2 is 4. 2 + 2 is 4 as a fact, not
think
as a necessity.
You think it's possible that 2 + 2 isn't 4?
No, it's not possible for 2 + 2 not to be 4, but it's not necessary. It's a fact. The
Then
difference
we
between
just must
necessity
be
and a fact.
there must just be a language barrier. Necessary means it's not possible for it to be otherwise. If something is possibly not this way and possibly this way, it's not necessary.
I don't agree with that definition. Do you have a dictionary or can I look it up?
Sure, yeah, you could look up like, I don't know, necessary.
I see. I'm having a bit of problem with my network. Can you read this from your end?
Yeah, the word necessary means something that must be or has to be.
Okay.
You seem to be thinking about necessary as like necessary for something. And that's a way that you could use the term, right? You could say, it's necessary to go to your classes.
So from my end, I'm seeing the phrase is necessary means something is required, needed, or essential to reach a goal or finish a task. So it's something that is required, needed, or essential. So if you say the universe is necessary, means it's required for something or essential to do something. It's just like I said, 2
That's
+
not
2 is 4. 2
the
+
it's
2
not
is 4 as
the
a
version of it that I'm using. I'm using a slightly different version.
Okay. Let me check if there's a second meaning for the word. Sorry.
If you want this specific one, metaphysical necessity is there's like a Wikipedia page on it.
Let me go to that. Metaphysical necessity.
Yep. Or like necessary and sufficient conditions. Actually, probably just like metaphysical necessity.
Okay. Okay. So the definition, can I read it out?
Yeah, go for it.
Metaphysical necessity is a type of truth that must be true in all possible worlds,
Yep.
sitting between strict logical necessity and physical necessity.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this is just qualifying the word necessary. It's not the true meaning of necessary.
True in all possible
I don't know
worlds.
whether you
That
understand.
all ways the world could possibly be, it's going to include this. If something's necessary, then
Yeah.
it's not
So
possible for it to not be.
yeah. So if you see, when I had to add metaphysical to the necessary in order to get this definition, which I'm not opposed to actually.
Hmm?
I don't know whether you understand my point.
Well, if it would be, I don't know, if it's like easier to understand, we could say that the universe exists instead of not existing because it's metaphysically necessary that the universe exists.
Okay. 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 So I think we can work on that. Okay. So now when I said the universe existence, so if you bring up metaphysical necessity, then we'll have to also go into other different composition of the universe, like the planets, the solar system, galaxies. So it's just like someone saying that those things just came into existence because it came into existence
They're gonna
without
come
a
into
god.
existence for different reasons. You know, the reason what explains like the Earth's coming into existence is different from what explains the sun's coming into existence. So there's going to be like a specific causal chain for each of these. Why would God want any of them though?
That's actually a very good question that we'll have to dive in a bit deeper into. First of all, I want to know what is your definition of God before we continue. So I'll now to progress.
Like an ultimate mind?
Can you expand it?
Let's just do like a mind that caused the universe.
Okay, a mind that caused the universe. Okay, we can work with that. So can I give a separate definition?
What's your definition of God? Yeah, go for it.
So I would say a being who has the ability to create outside of time and within time.
Okay, so a being that has no, I think God refers to a specific position. I'm not sure that it's super coherent to say that it's just like a being that can create outside of time. Like, I don't know if angels were outside of time but could create things, would that make angels God?
Angels don't create. And
Okay.
angels are not outside of time.
If God
As
gave them
according
the
to
power to,
Christianity.
would they then be God?
Can you rephrase?
Let's say God made an angel who was outside of time, but then had the ability to create things. Would those angels then be God?
Angels cannot be outside of time. It's like saying that putting an AI into a humanoid form doesn't make the AI to be human. or giving him human abilities and the rest of all those things.
God
So that
can't
is
make
something
an
that's
angel outside of time?
no. I said angels are not outside of time; they are within time.
God can't
But
make one
even though
that's
they are
outside of
outside,
time?
even though they are outside of time, it does not still make them God, because it's like giving an artificial intelligence humanoid abilities and claiming he's a human.
But
I don't
then
know
what
whether
part
you
of the
understand.
definition of God would he not fit?
So can you rephrase?
Let's say there's an angel. The angel's outside of time. The angel has the ability to make something that's in time. What part of the definition of God wouldn't that fit?
That is actually a very good question.
That's why I think
Uh,
that a mind that created the universe is a better definition. I think that what God is meant to do is pick out the role.
okay, we can work with that.
Mhm.
An ultimate mind.
Yeah,
Well, it's basically going to we're still going to basically run into the same issue if we use the ultimate mind.
sure. Well, that's not true under ultimate, but so why would God want the universe or any of the planets?
I'll say that is for him to decide. But basically, based on what my faith teaches, it's basically for us to know him, love him, and serve him.
Okay, but we could know him, love him, and serve him way better if he like revealed himself to us. So it seems like God isn't doing a good job of achieving his own goals.
So like, how do you want him to reveal himself to you?
He could say in the clouds, he could write with the stars, Christianity is true in every language on earth. And then, we would all be Christians.
Yeah, but even if it does that, I don't think that you also still believe that he's God.
Why not? Why is he playing hide and seek? If what he wants is for us to like worship him and serve him,
Look,
this seems like the
he's
best way
going
to
to be
get that
doing that.
done.
Is he going to be doing that every generation?
You could just do it. Well, yeah, you could just have all the. Yeah, you could do that every time there's like a new language that emerges. Why not?
So every time there's a new language that emerges, God comes out and writes in the sky in that particular language.
Yeah, the stars could realign. It could be a miracle that further confirms it.
So I don't know, are you familiar with the scriptures?
Yeah.
The Bible. So the miracles that are done in the Bible, why don't you go with them?
I have no evidence that those ones
Why
took
don't you see?
place.
Okay, so you want something that you see by yourself before you believe.
Just something that's independently verified. Like the only place that claims the miracles that are claimed in the Bible is the Bible itself. Like you're not
Okay,
going to find other
I
places
don't
that claim that Jesus rose from the dead.
well, there are not many people that will have to write about it. I don't know whether you get. If the world at that time was not is a place that is like ours. Like for example, I'm in Nigeria, you're somewhere I think in the United States. So if something was to happen to you, it's easy for me to know it and then document it right here. But at that time, it's mostly people that is going to be in that area around him that is going to write about it.
Hmm?
And if you read yeah,
Yeah,
I should go on.
but somehow there's like zero.
Yeah, there are 500 recorded witnesses to the resurrection.
Like who?
They are, I don't think their names were recorded.
Why would I
But they
believe that
have
there's
other
500
sources that talk.
eyewitnesses?
You see, that is the point that I'm actually making. It's the same thing too with the stars. If God was to write in the stars, you also question, why should I believe God wrote on the stars?
Because nobody else could write on the stars. It's not like some human could do it. Anybody can write down that
Well,
any miracle happened. You know, I
well,
could write down that I rose
you
from the
can you can
dead.
also you can also come out with alternate theories like, oh, maybe it's an alien or it's a government project, one or two other things
I
to
agree,
just
but it's a
disclaim
question
that
of
it's God
what's
that
most
wrote on the
likely.
stars.
You know, if you see the stars like rewriting themselves, you know, seems to indicate a high level of knowledge with our languages. Or better yet, you could
Okay,
have
so if
it
you
written in the stars for all future languages too. This is stuff that aliens couldn't ever know.
that is coming from a point of assumption that aliens are not aware of it. But if you see the Earth as the only planet that is suitable for life for in our entire solar system, that should be a form of evidence to you. Don't you agree?
Why would God want such a big universe that only has such limited life?
I said in our entire solar system. So we don't know at this point if there are other places that have life in our universe.
Why would God want that? Why would God want there to be only one planet with life in the solar system?
That is for him to know.
Okay, well, then it
It's
doesn't seem like your view offers much
it's
of an explanation.
no. It's basically like someone creates. I don't know. It's basically like someone creates a computer simulation, and then you give that simulation the ability to think by itself. And then there are some part of the simulation that you want it to be in a particular way, and the other part you want it to be a particular way. And then the people are like, why is this part in this particular way? There's no way for us to know because we are not in the mind of God.
Yeah. So here's the problem is that in order for your worldview to be an explanation, you would need to give some sort of reason to think that God would make the world this way. That means that there needs to be some sort of explanation for why God would choose to create just one Earth that has life on it and then all the other planets not having life on them. Why would God want that? If we don't know, then it's not evidence.
Like I said, I don't know. I don't know. Does the absence of my explanation does not point to evidence? It's like I said, a person who creates something in a particular way, and then allows other people to be there. It's just like the pyramids, for example. People are asking why did the Egyptians create this thing, and you see some bizarre theories that comes out from time to time regarding it. That's just human creation.
We know why they did.
Something that is on earth. No, something that is on earth. No, like
we
you say,
can literally
why they
explain
did, but
this. We know exactly why they did it. They did it for their religious beliefs.
Yeah, they did it for their religious belief based on human beings that are on earth, and still there are still some speculations about some different other reasons why they might have built the pyramid or the Stonehenge and the rest of all those things. So if you are looking at it just based on beings on our own, we see that things that we build, there are some questions that will still arise that why did we build it in this particular way? So it's the same thing too with God. He's the builder, he's the creator. He can decide to build something in a particular way without us knowing the reason for why he did it. And that does not serve as evidence against him not doing it.
But it does undermine the explanation. In order for your explanation to be an explanation at all, you would need to predict that God would do this. If you don't have a reason to think that God would do it this way, then it being this way isn't evidence.
I don't know whether you're getting the point that I'm saying.
I think I'm trying, but listen, I probably got to go, so I appreciate coming up here. I'm going to read my final super chats, and then I'm very sick and tired. Jaded Sage, thanks so much for the super chat. I appreciate you so much. Thank you so much, Slessy. Thank you. Valena, thanks so much for the super chat. For me, God may exist due to distinct order in DNA. Why would God want distinct order in DNA? Why would he want that? Coffee College, thanks so much for the super chat. God's a dick, don't choke on him. Mods over gods. LOL. Thanks so much for the super chat. Bido Banchito, thanks so much for the tier 1 sub. And then I think we have a video prepared. Sorry if stream was like low energy today. I'm tired. And sick. Well, okay, it's up. It's up and going. Check it out. Check it out, give it a watch. It's titled, He Refused to Use His Own Mind.
I wrote a book on this verse.
Then you should have no problem explaining it.
It explains what a actual allegory and the difference between a allegory and a metaphor and an idiom and what they actually represent.
What's the difference between an allegory and a metaphor and an idiom? What's the difference if you wrote a book on it? That's brutal. That's brutal. That's truly brutal.
What's brutal? You just cut me off?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. Floor is yours. Go for it.
If I'm slow, I've lost.
I'm not saying that, but the audience might be drawing some implications.
Every metaphor, according to the word of God, is a idiom.
Okay. Hey, what's up? How's it going?
Hi, how you doing?
Go check it out. It's live on my YouTube channel. All right, I'll see you guys tomorrow. See you later. Have a good one. Bye-bye. See you later.